Imagine yourself in another time, walking slowly through a small village where the rhythms of life are tied to thetaning of the seasons and the quiet patience of the earth. The evening air is cool, carrying the faint scent of damp soil, smoke curling from low-burning hearths, and the sweetness of ripening grain. Lanterns flicker gently in distant windows, their soft glow spilling across cobblestones and thatched rooftops, creating tiny pools of warmth in the fading light. Nearby, a calm river winds through the fields, its dark water whispering against they banks as if it holds stories older than any human memory. Stories of sowing, reaping, and patient labor repeated over countless generations. In this quiet world, the ordinary rhythm of life is magnified, every sound and every movement given space to breathe, every action part of the gentle pulse of the village. As a serf, your life is closely bound to the land. The turn of each season signals the work to come, and with harvest approaching, there is a palpable sense of anticipation in the air. Fields stretch wide, golden and luminous in the waning light, each stalk of wheat, barley, or rye, carrying both the promise of sustenance and the weight of centuries of tradition. These fields are not just workspaces, they are classrooms, temples, and playgrounds all at once, where the lessons of patience, care, and respect are taught by touch, observation, and quiet guidance. Tools are humble but vital: wooden rakes, clay vessels, woven baskets, each worn smooth by repeated hands, each part of a slow, careful ceremony that transforms labor into ritual. Every scrape of a rake against soil, every tie of a sheaf, every of a basket is deliberate, a small act that honors the earth and the life it sustains. Evening settles over the village slowly, as if reluctant to let go of the warmth of the day. The smoke from hearths drifts lazily into Veski, mingling with the earthy sense of freshly turned soil and drying grain. The air carries the distant sounds, of animals being gathered into pens, the soft lowing of cattle, the bleating of sheep, and the occasional cluck of chickens returning to roost. Children move carefully along the edges of the fields, carrying small bundles or observing the elders, learning the rhythm of work and the care required to handle both soil and crop. Their laughter is quiet, tempered by the awareness that these fields are places of labor, but still alive with playfulness and curiosity. Elders walk with deliberate steps, guiding hands, adjusting grips, offering gentle words of advice, your reassurance. The day's work is both a physical effort and a quiet meditation, a time when the mind can settle as the body moves in repetition alongside the steady cycle of the earth. The first sheaf of grain is treated with a particular reverence, often tied carefully and placed at the edge of the field or offered to the unseen spirit believed to protect the land and ensure future abundance. This small ritual, repeated across villages and generations, embodies gratitude, humility, and connection to forces beyond the self. It reminds the self, Thetha, labor is human. Sustenance comes from earth, sun, and rain. In a cycle that has persisted far longer than any one person's life, even as hands cut and bind, songs rise softly over the fields, simple chants or hums, passed down through time, meant not to entertain but to create rhythm, to ease bodies and minds through repetitive motion, to transform work into a shared, almost sacred experience. The sound of singing, the movement of hands, the warm scent of bread baking nearby, all these form a gentle symphony of life, intermittelity to the land. As twilight deepens, shadows lengthen across the fields, painting the stalks in shades of amber and bronze. The land seems to sigh with the end of the day, resting briefly before the labor of tomorrow begins. The serf pauses to take in the scene, the gentle sway of grain in the evening breeze, the reflective glimmer of water in the nearby river, the soft glow of lanterns through distant windows, and the quiet murmurs of neighbors gathering at the edge of the fields. Even the tools, laid down carefully for the night, seem to settle in the rhythm of life, carrying the story of work well done, and the promise of continued care. Each detail, the warmth of a clay jug in hand, the smooth texture of a woven basket, the familiar curve of a sickle's handle offers a subtle comfort, a reassurance of continuity, and the knowledge that the world will persist in its quiet cycles. In thicket ages, families gather for the evening meal. Bread, simple and fragrant, is shared with cheese or a few preserved fruits. Meals are humble but nourishing, eaten with the same care that governs every other action of the day. Conversation is soft, punctuated by the occasional laughter of a child, the crackle of a fire, or the distant call of an animal. The village is alive with presence, yet calm in its rhythm, as if all movement and sound are part of a single, harmonious design. By tending to their fields, honoring their tools, observing rituals, and sharing meals, the serfs participate in a continuum that ties their fleeting lives to the enduring pulse of the earth. The night grows deeper, and the air cools further, brushing gently against skin and carrying with it the subtle scent of grain and wood smoke. Stars begin to appear overhead, mirrored faintly in the calm river. The serf moves slowly back to the cottage, lantern in hand, each step measured, each breath in tune with the quieting world. Outside, the landscape seems to exhale with relief and rest, the fields themselves settling, the river flowing steadily, trees rustling softly in the evening breeze. In this stillness, there is a profound sense of connection and belonging, an awareness that life, though simple, is deeply entwined with the rhythms of nature and the care of human hands. The introduction of the harvest, the work in the fields, and the simple daily rituals all convergento. This moment of calm reflection. You, as a serf, are not merely a worker, but a participant in an age-old pattern, where every act of care, every sheaf tied, every loaf baked, and every quiet conversation contributes to the continuity of life. There is a satisfaction here that transcends toil, a sense of purpose embedded in repetition, gratitude sown into every action, and serenity drawn from the predictable, measured rhythm of existence. By moving slowly, observing carefully, and honoring each small task, the serf participates in a life that is modest yet deeply fulfilling, rooted in the pulse of the earth and the enduring cycles of harvest and growth. As you close your eyes and imagine this world, let the gentle sights, sounds, and scents guide you. Feel the cool evening air, the soft rustle of grain, the comforting glow of hearth fires, and the distant murmur of a calm river. Hear the quiet songs rising from the fields, the footsteps of children, the soft instructions of elders, and the steady creak of baskets and tools. All these elements blend into a lullaby of human labor, nature's patience, and the serene order of village life. Tonight, the serf's world is at peace, the harvest waits, and you, too, can rest in the quiet embrace. These timeless rhythms. At dawn, the world is quiet, holding its breath between night and day. The sky begins to lighten slowly, shifting from deep navy to the soft blush of pink and lavender, stretching over fields that are still heavy with night's dew. Grass bends under the weight of moisture, each blade glittering like tiny glass beads in the first fragile light. The air is cool and crisp, carrying the gentle scent of damp soil, freshly fallen leaves, and distant wood smoke. A river nearby moves with quiet purpose, its surface smooth and reflective, whispering against its banks as if reminding all who listen that time moves steadily, patiently, and with intention. In this calm early hour, Thule feels expansive, intimate, and yet somehow untouched by human hurry. Farmers stir in small cottages on the edges of fields, stepping carefully onto dew-soaked paths. Their feet leave faint impressions in the soft earth, and each step is deliberate, part of a long-learned rhythm that guides them through their days. Chickens cluck softly nearby, moving in measured steps towards scattered grains. Oxen shift patiently in their yokes, their breath misting in the cool air, unaware of the larger world beyond the fields. The first smoke from hearths drifts upward, carrying the smell of warm bread or porridge, and mingling with the earthy scents of the morning. There is a gentle calm in all of this, a stillness that seems to expand and fold back on itself, teaching anyone who walks slowly through it the art of observation and quiet attentiveness. Before tools are even touched, some farmer bows in humility. A small bow, a whispered word, or a soft breath in the direction of the earth marks its ritual. It is simple and private, not ceremonial in grandeur but intimate, acknowledging that human effort alone cannot summon a fruitful harvest. Across different lands, Roman villas, Celtic clearings, and even simpler peasant plots in later centuries, these quiet gestures are repeated. There is an unspoken respect for the soil, a recognition that work is part of a larger cycle that includes rain, sun, and the patience of nature itself. The soft rustle of wind through grain feels like a hymn in these moments, steady and comforting, accompanying the slow inhalation and exhalation of the early day. The tools of the harvest lie ready at the edge of the fields, their familiar shapes reassuring in the dim light. Wooden rakes glint faintly as they catch the rising sun. Sickles rest quietly on straw mats, and woven baskets wait patiently to be filled. These implements are worn smooth from long use, each groove and nick telling a story of seasons past. Handling them is an act of care as much as work. The rhythm of the hand on wood or the curve of the metal against palm is familiar, soothing, and even meditative. In these early hours, every movement is deliberate. There is no rush. The slow bending, cutting, gathering, and stacking mirrors the larger rhythm of the world. The earth turns, the river flows, the sky lightens, and life continues steadily. As the morning light spreads, small tasks begin softly. Children, sometimes as young as 7 or 8, follow their parents to the edge of the fields. They carry tiny baskets or bundles of grain, learning the motions by watching and imitating rather than by instruction. Their movements are careful, cautious, and at times hesitant, but their presence adds a gentle liveliness to the otherwise calm scene. Elders move alongside of them, offering quiet guidance, adjusting grips, or demonstrating emotion repeatedly until it is absorbed as much by observation as by practice. In these moments, learning is slow, patient, and intimate, a transfer of skill, knowledge, and respect for the land from one generation to the next. The air carries subtle sounds, the gentle clink of a basket against wood, the faint scrape of a tool along soil, the soft coo of pigeons in nearby lofts, the occasional lowing of cattle. These are not interruptions, but part of the ambient rhythm, a layered symphony that blends seamlessly with the natural world. Even the river, calm and constant, contributes to this orchestration, its water brushing softly against reeds, carrying away the day's beginnings as quietly as it brings them. The world is alive but not hurried. Every sound, every motion, every breath is part of a delicate pattern that teaches patience, attention, and the comfort of repetition. In these quiet fields, families also prepare for meals that are humble, but bread is baked in small ovens inside cottages, its warmth carrying through the air, mingling with the earthy smell of freshly turned soil. A small portion of milk or cheese may accompany the bread, sometimes a soft fruit preserved from the previous season. These breakfasts are simple, eaten quietly at first light, often with oglons toward the fields that await labor. The act of sharing food here is less about ceremony and more about presence, grounding, and preparation for the steady work to come. Eating slowly and attentively mirrors the pace of the day, and in that rhythm, even something as ordinary as a meal becomes part of a gentle ritual. As the sun rises higher, the dew evaporates, leaving stalks of wheat and barley glistening faintly in the growing warmth. Shadows shrink and shift, and the first real movement of labor begins. Hands grasp tools with familiarity and care, beginning to bend, cut, and gather the grain in patterns learned over years. Each action is measured, deliberate, and mindful. There is an awareness that a moment missed, a careless motion, or undue haste might disturb the balance of work. In this slow, considered manner, every movement feels purposeful yet calm. The act itself carries a quiet, almost meditative satisfaction. The surrounding landscape participates in this calm. Birds flit quietly from tree to tree, occasionally pausing to observe the workers. A gentle breeze moves through the leaves, softening the sun's warmth and rustling the grain in a soothing rhythm. Nearby cottages emit occasional wisps of smoke, signaling other families at work, and the soft clatter of utensils in kitchens adds a faint layer to the morning's quiet symphony. Everything seems in balance, the people, the animals, the tools, and the land, each coexisting in a gentle, enduring pattern. Even when small challenges arise, a stubborn patch of earth, a misaligned bundle of grain, or a fleeting cloud that dims the morning light, the pace remains measured. Frustration is tempered by the knowledge that work will continue, slowly, steadily, and with intention. There is comfort in the predictability of labor, and a sense of continuity in the recognition that this day mirrors hundreds of mornings before, and that countless mornings will follow. The land endures, the river flows, and the rhythm of life persists in its gentle constancy. By mid-morning, the fields are filled with the soft motion of labor. Each serf, family, or worker contributes their quiet presence to the larger tapestry of harvest. The sound of cutting, lifting, and bundling blends with the rustle of grain and the murmur of wind, creating a layered, soothing texture. The sun climbs higher, warming the soil and softening the early chill. while shadows shorten and the earth seems tame with subtle energy. There is satisfaction in progress, even if small, and a quiet joy in seeing the fruits of effort take shape, sheaf by sheaf, row by row. As noon approaches, the first short pauses occur. Workers lean on tools, brush sweat from brows, and take a sip of water or a small snack. These pauses are restful rather than hurried, moments of reflection, breathing, and observation. The gaze sweeps across the fields, noting the swaying grain, the distant cottages, the river's constant movement, and the faint shimmer of sunlight on dew still clinging to shaded areas. It is a reminder that work is not only physical but a conversation with the world itself, a dialogue of attention, respect, and gentle persistence. Slowly, the day begins to settle into its natural rhythm, each motion, each sound, each breath a part of the continuous pattern of harvest. The light shifts again warmer now, casting a golden glow over the fields. Shadows stretch long, the wind softens, and the world begins to feel like a gentle lull, a bridge between the dawn and the quiet of afternoon rest. Even in activity, there is stillness, and even in labor, there is meditation. By the time the sun reaches its zenith, the workers pause fully for midday rest, sometimes lying in the shade, sometimes eating a simple meal, or simply observing the fields in silence. The landscape itself seems to pause with them. Birds move slowly, water glides quietly, and the wind softens its movement. The repetition of the morning, the careful motions, the attentive hands, the quiet songs has woven a thread of calm through every corner of the village, every stretch of field, every small act of human care. And so, morning passes gently into midday, a slow unfolding of light, labor, and observation. The first hours of harvest have been measured, calm, and purposeful, a meditation as much as a necessity. It is a world in which time moves differently, not by the urgency of clocks or schedules, but by the pulse of the earth, the sway of grain, and the careful, deliberate rhythm of human hands at work. In this quiet moment, the land and its people, in a fragile harmony, a soft symphony of ordinary life that is as ancient as it is enduring. Harvest was not possible without tools, yet these instruments were never meant to impress or intimidate. They were humble, simple, and deeply familiar, shaped by years of repeated use rather than by design or aesthetics. Bronze sickles, their edges, dulled with age, rested alongside wooden rakes, smoothed by countless hands, their surfaces polished by decades of careful labor. Baskets, woven from flexible reeds or supple willow, sat patient line at the edge of the fields, waiting to hold the first bundles of grain. Every handle and curve bore the shine of touch, not of varnish, a testament to hands that had lifted, carried, and worked with them season after season. Tools were more than instruments, they were companions, silent participants in the slow rhythm of life that governed the fields and the cottages at their borders. From the first light of dawn, these tools were present in every movement of the serf, shaping not only the work, but the experience of labor itself. Children observe elders handling the rakes and sickles, their eyes wide with quiet fascination. The curve of a sickle, the smooth groove in a rake handle, the precise angles of a woven basket, they spoke of centuries of when a sickle was sharpened, it was done carefully, stone against metal with steady, repetitive strokes, almost as though the tool itself were being sung awake for the day. The rhythm was mesmerizing. Scrape, grind, lift, place, lift again, action deliberate, each breath in tune with the pulse of the land. It was in these motions that patience was learned, endurance practiced, and respect for the tools and for the earth internalized. Repairs were part of the life of every implement. A broken handle could be replaced with wood from a nearby grove, split carefully and smoothed to fit, joined again with twine or leather thongs. Frayed baskets were rewoven by the same hands that had first carried them as children. Tools were rarely discarded. Instead, they were tended, mended, and returned to service, each repair another layer in the story they carried. In this care, the harvest became as much about continuity and persistence as it was about gathering grain. The field was alive with motion, and every hand that touched these tools was participating in a slow, ongoing dialogue with the past, with family, and with generations of laborers who had come before. The daily use of these implements created a rhythm that filled the senses, the soft scrape of a sickle cutting through stalks, the gentle crunch as bundles fell to the ground, The muted creak of a basket, slowly filling these sounds, were ordinary. But in repetition they became meditative. A child might pause to run a small hand along the smooth handle of a rake, feeling the warmth of many palms that had preceded theirs. Each tool told a story not just of work, but of care, or attention, of the understanding that small, deliberate actions sustained life. In the quiet of the fields, the tools themselves seemed to breathe, moving in rhythm with the hands that guided them, echoing the steady pulse of earth and sky. The material of the tools mattered as much as their shape. Bronze sickles were prized for their durability, though iron soon replaced them in many regions, providing strength without the weight of ornamentation. Handles were carefully selected from hardwoods, polished naturally by daily use, their texture comforting to those who held them. Baskets were woven from reeds and flexible willow, chosen not for beauty but for their strength and flexibility. Each weave carried the mark of countless repetitions, and though the designs were simple, they were refined over time by necessity and practice. Using such a basket required care. Lift slowly, balance carefully, ensure that nothing fell or was crushed. In these tasks, the mind moved slowly, attentively, and almost meditatively, attuning itself to the tools as extensions of the body and partners in labor. Even the act of sharpening a sickle carried a ritual-like quality. Stone was rubbed along the blade in slow, even motions, creating a rhythm that resonated with the natural pace of life. The sound was faint but steady, a quiet undercurrent that accompanied early morning work. Hands moved with confidence, guided by muscle memory and long experience. Watching a sickle come to readiness was a lesson in patience, teaching that speed was not a measure of skill. Instead, careful attention and repeated, deliberate effort ensured both longevity and effectiveness. This quiet attention to detail shaped the daily life of the serf, creating a bridge between work and reflection, labor and mindfulness. Tools were not used alone. They existed within a network of human care, and attached wooden rakes might be carried by a child toward a row of barley, their small hands adjusting grip and angle as an elder watched with patient approval. Baskets were lifted, passed from one person to another, lined with leaves or cloth to protect their precious contents. Sickles were handed to those beginning their cuts, their weight perfectly balanced, ready for repeated strokes. Even the animals in the field, oxen, goats, and sometimes shadooses, became part of this rhythm, moving in quiet harmony with human hands and the soft scrape of tools against the earth. Across the morning, each tool accrued its own story of work and attention. A rake might carry its imprint of dozens of palms over a decade, each polishing the wood, smoothing its edges, ensuring comfort and precision. A sickle bore the marks of sharpening stones, each one subtly different, each stroke an echo of hundreds of mornings like this one. Baskets swelled with grain, their weaves stretching slightly with use, but never breaking, always returning to service after careful adjustment. In caring for the tools, people learned tokari for the earth, for each other, and for themselves, finding solace in the continuity of labor and the gentle repetition of simple, enduring acts. Even small acts of maintenance were performed slowly and attentively. A frayed basket strap could be replaced with careful weaving. A wooden handle could be sanded and smoothed, a blade lightly oiled or honed. These tasks, mundane as they might appear, were essential to the rhythm of the harvest. They taught observation, patience, and responsibility. Each repair or preparation became part of the unbroken narrative of labor, reinforcing the bond between the worker, the tool, and the earth itself. The tools were silent teachers, guiding hands and minds in equal measure. The workday unfolded in measured motion. Hands grasped the tools with familiarity and precision. The sickle cut through stalks. With a soft, repetitive sound, the rake guided grains toward small piles, and baskets swayed gently as they were lifted and carried. The rhythm was steady, comforting, and predictable. Workers often moved in patterns learned over years, instinctively lipping themselves according to the flow of energy, light, and air. Even children, learning the motions slowly, became attuned to this pace, absorbing the logic of each action and the quiet satisfaction it brought. As the sun rose higher, warming the air and drying the dew, tools glistened faintly in the light. Bronze and iron blades reflected the soft hues of dawn and early morning. Wooden handles, warmed by repeated use, seemed to invite a touch of hands familiar with their weight and curvature. Woven baskets, once damp with dew, were now light and flexible, ready to hold the first sheaves of the day. The interaction between human and tool was intimate, each movement deliberate, each gesture building toward a harvest not rushed but earned through care, repetition, and patience. By mid-morning, the field was alive with quiet motion. The tools moved almost as extensions of workers' bodies, a seamless collaboration between human intention and crafted object. Hands, fingers, and palms guided each stroke and lift. The tools themselves carried a rhythm that became hypnotic, a gentle music that accompanied the day's labor. Observing this, one might feel the passage of centuries condensed into simple, repeated motions, the quiet wisdom of those who had used these implements long before and those who would continue after. Every touch of a tool was an act of respect. In using them, workers acknowledged the patience required for a harvest to succeed. The slow accumulation of skill across generations and the delicate balance of nature itself, the rhythm of scraping, cutting, gathering, and lifting was mirrored in the rise and fall of breath, the steady beat of hearts, and the subtle movement of the earth beneath their feet. There was comfort in this continuity, a sense of connection not only to the harvest, but to all who had worked these fields before, and all who would continue long after. Even as the day progressed, the gentle care of tools remained paramount. Blades checked, baskets adjusted, rakes smoothed by hand. The tension never wavered, for even small neglect could disturb the harmony of the work. Every task, repeated slowly and deliberately, reinforced the values of patience, endurance, and mindful attention. In this careful stewardship of tools, labor itself became an act of meditation, each action a quiet affirmation of life, skill, and the enduring bond between human and earth. And as the morning moved toward noon, the rhythm of tools, hands, and earth carried the workers forward, steady and unbroken. There was satisfaction in the continuity of motion, the quiet joy in seeing tasks completed with care, and the comfort of participating in something larger than oneself. In these moments, the humble tools were more than instruments. They were companions, guides, and teachers, bearing witness to the steady, enduring pulse of harvest life. In many villages, the very first sheaf of grain was treated with a reverence that extended beyond practical need. It was not meant for immediate use, nor was it a token of display or pride. Instead, this first harvest was offered as a quiet gift, a moment of reflection, and a ritual of gratitude. The morning air carried the soft scent of dew, mixed with the earthy fragrance of tilled soil and ripening grain. Light spread gradually across the fields, painting stalks in soft golds and greens. In this gentle illumination, the first sheaf seemed almost to glow, its presence commanding attention without sound or motion. Families approached slowly, carrying with them small offerings of bread, wine, milk, or fruit, humble gifts meant to honor the unseen forces believed to sustain the earth and sky. These gifts were not part of any grand ceremony. Rather, they were private, intimate groundings that human effort alone could not ensure abundance. Children often accompanied their parents to the fields during this ritual. Their eyes were wide with wonder, watching as elders selected the first stalks, binding them together with care. A simple ribbon or strip of cloth might be tied around the sheaf, holding the stalks in quiet embrace. In some regions, the sheaf was laid on a small wooden altar constructed near the field's edge, while in others, it remained amidst the growing crop, left as a token to nature itself. These practices were imbued with patience. No hurried motions were allowed. The adults spoke softly, if at all, their voices blending with the gentle rustling of grain and the low hum of distant animals. The child's gaze followed every movement, absorbing not just the action but the calm respect that underscored it, understanding through observation rather than instruction that humility preceded any reward from the land. The ritual was a reminder that crops did not belong solely to those who tilled the soil. Rain, sun, and soil worked in concert with human hands, and the first fruits embodied this partnership. Each step of the process reflected careful thought, choosing the right stalks, binding them together so that none were crushed, and placing them in a position where they could be seen and honored without being disturbed. In some villages, this sheaf would remain standing for several days, a quiet sentinel watching over the field and reminding everyone who passed that gratitude was as important as labor. The act itself was meditative, a bridge between work and reflection, allowing the mind to slow even as the body continued the steady rhythm of daily chores. Observing the ritual, one might notice small, almost imperceptible, the slight bend of a stalk as it is tied, the faint creak of twine or ribbon, the subtle shifting of a basket as offerings are placed nearby. All of these moments contribute to the gentle cadence of the event. There is no pressure to finish quickly. The day itself seems to pause, creating space for quiet contemplation. Thuin stirs lightly, rustling through the grain in soft waves, harmonizing with the actions of the people and forming an auditory layer of calm. Even the occasional call of a bird or the distant lowing of cattle seems toppling to the ritual, part of the wider tapestry of natural sound and human intention. Families participated, yet each person's actions were deliberate and measured. Children learned by imitation, watching how the eldest carefully handled the stalks, how each ribbon was tied, and how offerings were set with attention. Adults moved slowly, lifting their hands to place small portions of bread, milk, or wine beside the sheaf, ensuring that nothing was spilled or disturbed. The weight of the items, the textures of cloth or ribbons, the smell of fresh baked bread all engaged the senses in a manner that fostered mindfulness. Every gesture became an extension of gratitude, each breath harmonizing with the rhythm of the land. Even silence carried meaning. The quiet presence of the participants was itself a form of reverence, demonstrating that attention and care were as vital as the gifts laid before the first fruits. The first sheaf's position in the field mattered. In some communities, it was placed at the center of the plot, where it could oversee the growing crops, a symbolic guardian of abundance yet to come. In others, it rested near the field's edge, close to a stream or small altar, where it contrasted sunlight and water, mirroring the conditions necessary for continued growth. The act of placement was gentle and deliberate, carried out with steady hands and thoughtful movements. By moving slowly, the participants connected with the land itself, understanding through physical engagement that their survival and prosperity were intertwined with the patience and generosity of nature. Throughout the day, the first shift, a focal point of quiet reflection. Farmers continued their tasks with measured care, each movement echoing the calmness of the ritual. The soft scrape of sickles, the rhythmic gathering of stalks, the gentle lift and placement of baskets all were underscored by the awareness of the first fruits, a symbol of partnership between humans and the earth. Even the animals in the field moved with consideration, unaware perhaps of the shift's significance, but contributing to the steady pulse of morning activity. The world seemed to operate in dual rhythms, one of practical labor, the other of meditative awareness, interwoven seamlessly as the day progressed. In some traditions, small offerings were left alongside the sheaf to honor invisible guardians of the land, theses of weather, or ancestors believed to watch over fields. These offerings were never lavish or ostentatious. A slice of bread, a small cup of wine, or a tiny portion of milk sufficed. The act was deeply symbolic, a gesture of respect, humility, and acknowledgement that human hands were only part of a larger system. Children learned the importance of giving without expectation, of recognizing unseen support, and of valuing patience over immediate reward. The first fruits became a silent teacher, demonstrating that reverence and attentiveness were inseparable from survival and abundance. The ritual extended into social observation as well. Neighbors might quietly join one another at the edges of their respective fields, observing the first sheaf, sharing knowledge about proper timing, and exchanging tips on care and binding. These interactions were soft, unobtrusive, yet meaningful. Knowledge was passed gently, orally, and visually, ensuring that techniques, beliefs, and respectful practice endured across generations. In this way, the ritual of first fruits not only reinforced gratitude, but also nurtured community cohesion, fostering calm, cooperative relationships between neighbors who shared both labor and land. As mid-morning approached, the ritual gradually gave way to the main work of harvest, but its presence lingered. The first sheaf stood quietly, a gentle reminder of purpose and mindfulness. Its existence fulfills the pace of labor, encouraging slower, more attentive movements, and fostering an ongoing sense of reverence for the soil. Children who had observed the ritual carried its lessons into the work that followed, adjusting their actions, pausing to notice the textures of grain, the sounds of animals, and the subtle shifts of light across the fields. Even in the midst of active labor, the first fruits lesson endured, that care, patience, and gratitude were as crucial as speed or strength. The afternoon continued in the same gentle rhythm. Harvesting, gathering, and sorting all occurred with attention to detail. The first sheaf, though untouched by human hands by its initial placement, remained central to the consciousness of those in the fields. Each cut of a stalk, each careful placement in a basket, each step across the field reflected a meditative awareness instilled by Themurning's ritual. The sun shifted across the sky, warming the land and drying early dew, casting long across the fields. The sounds of wind, water, and distant animals blended with the rhythmic motions of human activity, forming an understated symphony of ordinary life, steeped in quiet reverence. By late afternoon, the first sheaf had fulfilled its role as a symbol of gratitude and humility. It continued to stand, serving as a marker of the ritual's presence and the lessons embedded within it. Workers might pause for short breaks, noticing the sheaf in the periphery of their attention, drawing subtle reassurance from its quiet persistence. Even the most routine tasks, binding small bundles, adjusting baskets, checking for stray stalks, were influenced by the calm, measured pace set by the morning ceremony. The field itself seemed more attentive, more alive, as though it responded to the deliberate care lavished upon both the grain and the ritual. As evening approached, Thiessen lowered gently, bathing the field in warm golden light. The first sheaf remained undisturbed, its presence a testament to patience, partnership, and mindfulness. Families gathered their tools, prepared small meals, and reflected briefly on the day's work, all while the first fruit stood as a silent guide. The wind carried faint scents of soil, grain, and smoke from nearby cottages, blending with the residual warmth of the sun. This moment, like the ritual itself, was slow, deliberate, and infused with gentle pause in the continual cycle of life and harvest. The ritual of first fruits was never hurried, never grandiose, and never about abundance. Its power lay in its quiet simplicity, in the slow, attentive gestures, and in the shared acknowledgement that life depended on forces beyond human control. Children, elders, and adults alike absorbed its lessons without speaking, understanding that respect, patience, and gratitude were as essential as skill or strength. In this way, the first sheaf became both a tangible object and an enduring symbol of harmony, teaching that every harvest, no matter how plentiful, begins with awareness, care, and humility. By nightfall, the field settled into gentle shadows, the first sheaf standing quietly amidst the remaining stalks. Its presence, though still, seemed almost to live in the minds of those who had participated in the morning's ritual. Lanterns glimmered in cottages nearby, fires crackled softly, and the calm hum of evening life spread through the village. In these quiet hours, the significance of the first fruits resonated not as a spectacle, but as a meditation, a lesson, and a reminder. Effort is most meaningful when tempered by gratitude and respect for the cycles of nature. Harvest was labor, yet it was rarely silent. From the first light of morning, voices rose softly above the gentle rustling of grain, weaving into the steady rhythm of work. The songs were modest and unhurried, simpler melodies passed from one generation to the next, carrying both memory and meaning. Children hummed nearby, tentative and shy, while older relatives offered their voices in steady, low tones, guiding the rhythm and filling the air with warmth. In distant lands, this practice took many forms. Norse workers chanted as they battened sheaves, their notes low and resonant, carrying across misty fields. In Mediterranean valleys, harvesters lifted their voices to the gods of grain, offering gratitude. With every chorus, each song was a thread in a lager tapestry, binding individuals together, ensuring that labor was shared not only by hands but by heart and breath. The songs served many purposes beyond simple melody. They maintained the pace of labor, helping workers coordinate the lifting, cutting, and bundling of stalks. The voice became a metronome, each syllable and beat aligning with the rhythm of hands and feet. The scrape of sickle against stalks, the gentle thump of bundles placed in baskets, the soft shuffle of feet across earth, all merged with the human voice to create a layered, soothing soundscape. Even in the quietest moments, when a worker paused to adjust a tool or inspect a sheaf, theme or chant lingered in the air, a gentle companion reminding all that they were part of something larger, a cycle of life, of care, and of continuity. Children often learned the songs informally. They observed adults as melodies, arose naturally from motion, noting how verses changed with action, a rising note as a bundle was lifted, a low chant accompanying bending or cutting. These songs became mnemonic devices, embedding knowledge of labor, tools, and rhythm into memory without the need for formal instruction. A child might hum softly as they carried a small basket, gradually synchronizing their movements with older singers. Over time, these melodies, simple and repetitive, became woven into the body itself. The breath, the motion of hands, their step across the field, all synchronized with song, creating a deep, physical understanding of both work and tradition. The environment itself contributed to the auditory landscape. A breeze moving through grain created a soft, constant rustle, joining with the buzz of bees and the distant calls of birds. The songs rose and fell, their cadence sometimes mimicking the wind, sometimes counterpointing it. When a worker leaned over to tie a sheaf, their voice might drop to a hum. When straightening to lift, a higher note might slip into the melody. This natural variation brought life and subtle nuance to each song, ensuring that no two mornings sounded eerily alike, even across different villages or regions. The principle remained. Song was part of the rhythm of harvest, an echo of the earth's quiet pulse. In Norselands, the chants often carried a sense of weight, their tones low and resonant, vibrating across misty morning fields. Each verse might invoke protection or fertility, softly acknowledging unseen forces that shaped life. The melody was not composed for performance, but for endurance, designed to support the body in repetitive labor while fostering a subtle spiritual connection. In Mediterranean valleys, singers often turned their voices upward, projecting gratitude toward the sun, the soil, and deities thought to govern abundance. Though the words varied, the purpose was consistent. Each note affirmed belonging, patience, and awareness of one's place within a larger system. The songs also created an invisible thread of community. As the melody passed from worker to worker, neighbor to neighbor, it fostered unity, allowing individuals to move together in shared rhythm. Even silence between notes was purposeful, for reflection or coordination. The interplay of voice, motion, and attention formed a slow, meditative practice that persisted long after morning light had grown stronger and the labor intensified. Songs were reminders that effort was not solitary. Each worker's contribution was harmonized with others, weaving a network of support, attention, and shared purpose. In some cultures, simple instruments might accompany the voice. A small drum, a wooden clapper, or the rhythmic tap of a foot provided a subtle beat to maintain pace. Yet these additions were never elaborate or distracting. They merely supported the natural flow of song and motion. In the absence of instruments, the human voice alone sufficed, carrying melodies across fields, through rows of grain, and into cottages, where others might pause briefly to listen. Even in solitude, a single worker might sing quietly, using rhythm and repetition to ease, strain, and maintain focus. The content of the songs varied as gently as the landscapes in which they were sung. Some recounted previous harvests, noting which seasons had been abundant and which lean. Others reflected the natural world, the flight of birds, the movement of rivers, their changing color of leaves. Many were playful, small rhymes designed to entertain children or lighten the monotony of repetitive labor. Some were solemn, a meditation on patience, endurance, and the relationship between human effort and natural provision. Each song carried layers of meaning, teaching history, rhythm, and cultural values through melody rather than instruction. Singing also acted as a gentle form of encouragement. When fatigue crept in during long hours, a familiar verse could lift spirits, reminding workers of both the temporary nature of discomfort and the collective effort that surrounded them. The voice, rising above the whisper of the wind or the scrape of tools, became a source of comfort. Children learned not only melody but also resilience, observing that challenges could be met with steadiness, rhythm, and calm attention. Each note carried reassurance, a subtle signal that work was worthwhile, patience was rewarded, and community mattered. Even small pauses in the day were enhanced by song. A moment of rest beneath a tree or beside a stream might include soft humming or whispered choruses. These moments reinforced mindfulness, creating a link between body, mind, and environment. The songs encouraged observation, noticing the movement of grain in the breeze, the patterns of sunlight, the slight tremor of animals nearby. Through melody, Workers attuned themselves to subtle changes, learning the land's rhythm and preparing for adjustments in labor, whether in harvesting, bundling, or carrying produce. In colder regions, song helped sustain warmth and morale. Breath became part of melody, drawing in crisp morning air and exhaling into rhythm. The physicality of singing, combined with motion, generated gentle energy, keeping hands nimble and bodies steady. In warmer climates, melodies carried across fields, bringing a cooling cadence that broke the monotony of repetitive labor. Across all regions, the principle remained the same. Song was a practical, emotional, and social companion, transforming labor into shared, almost sacred experience. Generations of workers contributed to the same melodies. Lines were decades, sometimes changing slightly with each singer. A child might add a small variation, an elder might elongate a note, creating a living tradition that was both stable and adaptable. In this way, song connected past, present, and future, a subtle, persistent thread binding individuals to ancestors, neighbors, and the land itself. The melody became a repository of culture, knowledge, and care, stored not on paper or stone, but in the breath, memory, and motion of those who lived and labored with it. By midday, the songs intertwined seamlessly with labor. Each movement, from bending to lift, cutting to tie, placing to carry, was enhanced per rhythm. Breath, motion, and melody were inseparable. Even as fatigue increased, the persistent cadence sustained focus, providing reassurance and comfort. Fields, once silent except for wind and animal movement, became landscapes of collective melody, where every participant, young or old, added their voice to the notes. By afternoon, the rhythm of song had become internalized. Workers might hum quietly without conscious thought, their bodies guided by long-practiced patterns of motion and melody. The tools, the earth, and the voices coexisted in a delicate balance, creating a soft, enduring soundscape that carried through the day. Even when voices faded, the memory of melody influenced motion, creating harmony between human effort and rhythm. As the sun began to lower, casting long, soft shadows across the fields, the songs slowed naturally. Notes became elongated, breaths drawn deeper, steps more measured. Children, tired but attentive, continued to follow the cadence. Observing elders practiced slowing of rhythm. The land itself seemed to absorb melody, the golden light emphasizing the gentle beauty of the fields and the subtle interconnection of humans, animals, and grain. By evening, songs faded into quiet hums, blending with the natural sounds of twilight, the breeze, distant river, and rustle of grain. Workers rested briefly, aware of the continuing presence of day's labor, yet comforted by the shared melody that had accompanied every motion. Even in the absence of voice, the field retained a sense of calm rhythm, a reflection of the human effort interwoven with patience, care, and community. The practice of singing during harvest was neither performance nor competition. It was a quiet meditation, a bridge between labor and reflection, body and mind, self and community. Each note, each pause, each breath was an acknowledgement of continuity, of belonging, and of harmony with the cycles of nature. Children absorbed lessons in endurance, awareness, and cultural continuity, while adults found solace in the collective act. Songs among the grain became a gentle, enduring thread, connecting human experience across time and place. Even as the night approached, the memory of song lingered. Lanterns glimmed in cottages, smoke drifted from hearths, and the rhythm of quiet evening life echoed faintly across the melodies had been both practice and gift, nurturing mind, body, and spirit. They reminded all who sung and those who listened that even repetitive labor could be beautiful, meditative, and connecting. These songs were quiet teachers, carrying lessons of patience, community, and gratitude through soft voice and steady. When the sun reached its highest point in the sky, casting a warm, golden light across the fields, the labor of morning slowed. The air grew heavy with heat, and the long, steady rhythm of work naturally eased into pause. It was the hour when families and neighbors came together for a simple, shared meal, a moment of respite amidst tireless cycle of the harvest. Beneath broad trees whose leaves rustled softly in the gentle wind, or along the quiet edges of the fields, the workers spread their modest provisions. Bread, still warm from early ovens, rested on cloths alongside small portions of cheese, fresh fruit plucked carefully from nearby orchards, and cool water carried in clay jars. Each item was simple in nature, yet in this shared moment, the taste seemed heightened, richer than it might have been in solitude. The sunlight dappled the grass, casting shifting patterns beneath Thorika's resting bodies, and the air was filled with the mingling sense of baked bread, ripe fruit, and the warmth beneath. Children, released from the structured movements of labor, wandered at the edges of the meal, their small voices and laughter soft and playful, carrying lightly on the breeze. Some played gentle games with sticks or tiny balls of woven straw, while others simply watched, absorbing the calm interactions of their elders. Adults settled on the grass, leaning against tree trunks or each other, sharing quiet conversation. While they ate, their voices were low and rhythmic, mingling with the natural sounds of the field. A faint rustle of grain, the distant hum of bees, the occasional cluck of chickens or lowing of cattle. Conversation was neither hurried nor animated, but slow, deliberate, and reflective, reinforcing bonds and allowing each person to savor the moment. There was no need for pomp or ceremony. The ritual of shared meals was quiet, gentle, and entirely ordinary, yet profoundly sustaining. The act of eating together during harvest was more than simple nourishment. It reinforced a sense of community, a quiet understanding that human effort and human connection were intertwined. Every bite of bread, every sip of water, every slice of fruit carried meaning, reflecting both gratitude for the food itself and recognition of the labor that had produced it. Bread, made from the previous harvest, tied the present to a reminder of seasons gone by and of those who had worked the fields before. Cheese, preserved and tended carefully over time, symbolized patience and the ability to prepare for scarcity. Fresh fruit brought vitality and sweetness, a small reminder of nature's generosity amid toil. Together, these simple elements created a balanced, harmonious moment, nourishing body and spirit in equal measure. The sensory experience of the meal was calming and deliberate. The crunch of bread crust, the soft give of cheese, the cool, slightly tart bite of fruit, and the refreshment of water offered gentle contrasts that grounded the body and mind. Hands reached slowly for items, breaking bread into small, considerate portions rather than hurriedly devouring it. Children learned to handle utensils carefully, to pour water without spilling, and to appreciate the quiet pleasure of a shared meal. These skills, taught without instruction or reprimand, became absorbed naturally through observation and participation. Every sound, from the gentle rustle of cloth to the soft exhalation after a sip of water, became part of the rhythm of midday, a meditative pattern in which all participants were immersed. The meal was also a time of storytelling. Elders might recount earlier harvests, sharing details of fields long since plowed, seasons of plenty, and years of careful preparation. Stories were not loud or dramatic. They unfolded slowly, each sentence measured, each detail carefully chosen. Listeners absorbed these tales while eating, allowing the narrative to mingle with the flavors and textures of their food. In this way, the simple act of sharing a meal became a vessel for cultural continuity, passing knowledge, values, and traditions from one generation to the next without the need for formal instruction. Even silence was meaningful. When a story paused, the quiet allowed for reflection, creating space for thought and appreciation of both the narrative and the natural world surrounding Thepit. In Mediterranean regions, the midday meal often included olives, small portions of dried or fresh fruit, and simple breads baked in communal ovens. The warm sun highlighted the subtle colors of the landscape: golden fields, deep green leaves, and soft brown earth. Workers rested under vines or in the shade of fig and olive trees, allowing their bodies to recover from morning labor, while their senses took in the beauty around them. In northern lands, the meal might include cheese, small loaves, and preserved vegetables eaten beneath shelter of coniferous trees or along shaded banks of a river. In all regions, the principle remained the same. The meal was a time for connection, reflection, and mindful attention, enhancing both physical and emotional. The children, ever curious, observed more than they played. They noted how bread was broken into even pieces, how water was poured with care, and how adults moved gracefully between tasks of eating, conversing, and observing the field. These moments taught lessons in patience, attention, and respect, through participation rather than instruction. The rhythm of the meal mirrored the rhythm of work itself, deliberate, steady, and measured, even when the sun climbed high and shadows shifted across the ground. Vecum structure of shared meals persisted, offering continuity amid the ever-changing patterns of light and movement. The meal also facilitated quiet collaboration. Neighbors might exchange food, trading bread, forkies, or fruit for water, strengthening communal bonds. Advice about tending fields, timing of harvest, or a pair of tools might be shared softly across the gathering, blending seamlessly with conversation and sustenance. Such exchanges were subtle, gentle, and often overlooked by those not present, yet they were essential to the cohesion of rural communities. The meal became both nourishment and dialogue, reinforcing trust, interdependence, and awareness that survival depended not only on individual effort, but also on collective fare. After the food was eaten, hands and faces were wiped on cloths or aprons, and tools were checked and readied for the afternoon's labor. The movement was slow, unhurried, and deliberate, ensuring that each participant transitioned smoothly from rest back to work. Some lingered briefly beneath the trees, closing their eyes or stretching gently, listening to the breeze through the leaves or the subtle rustle of grain. Others walked slowly to the edge of the field, observing the growing sheaves, noting patterns of light and shadow, and mentally preparing for the next stage of harvest. The calm of the midday meal extended beyond eating, influencing behavior and pace long after the final bite. The sensory details of the shared meal, taste, smell, touch, sight, and sound formed a layered experience. Warm bread, softened cheese, crisp fruit, cool water, rustling leaves, chirping birds, distant livestock all contributed to a multisensory awareness that grounded participants in the present. By attending to these details, workers developed mindfulness, a subtle understanding of the interconnectedness of their labor, sustenance, and environment. Children absorbed this awareness intuitively, creating a foundation of observation, gratitude, and rhythm that would carry into their own future harvests. Even these simplest actions were imbued with care. Bread was torn into uniform pieces, water poured without spilling, fruit sliced or shared thoughtfully. Each gesture reinforced attentiveness and respect both for fellow humans and for the natural resources that sustained life. The rhythm of these actions became meditative, calming the body and mind, while simultaneously teaching values of patience, mindfulness, and collaboration. The meal was more than sustenance. It was a lesson embodied in texture, taste, movement, and attention. By late afternoon, when shadows grew longer and the sun began its descent, the memories of midday meals persisted. Workers returned to fields with bodies refreshed, spirits lightened, and hearts aligned with the rhythm of both labor and community. Even as harvest resumed, the calm established during shared meals remained, guiding movements, infusing interactions with attentiveness, and sustaining energy through the steady pulse of continued work. The practice of shared meals exemplified the quiet beauty of everyday life. It transformed ordinary food into a ritual, ordinary pause into meditation, and ordinary relationships into enduring bonds. Each loaf of bread, each slice of fruit, each cup of water contributed not only to physical well-being, but also to emotional and communal harmony. Children observed, adults reflected, and the land itself seemed to absorb the calm rhythm of carrying it forward into the growing day. By evening, the meals and the rhythms they established died gently in memory. Lanterns in cottages glimmered, the wind whispered through trees, and distant livestock settled for the night. The quiet presence of midday meals continued to resonate, reminding all who participated that the harvest was more than grain. It was patience, care, community, and the gentle art of living in harmony with the land. In these moments, shared sustenance became both ritual and refuge, offering calm, connection, and continuity amidst the laborious yet rewarding work of harvest. Every harvest was part of a larger rhythm, one that extended far beyond the labor of a single day or even a single year. Life in the fields was orchestrated not by the ticking of clocks or the noise of bustling towns, but by the steady, measured cycles of the seasons. Farmers observed the world with patience, attuning themselves to the gradual changes in light, the lengthening and shortening of shadows, the shift in air temperature, and the subtle signals in the soil. Spring arrived gently, carrying the first warmth of the sun, the soft greening of buds, and the scent of rain on tilled earth. Fields once bare began to blush with life, delicate shoots emerging in neat rows, aqueous promise of abundance yet to come. Summer expanded this promise into full richness, filling fields with stalks heavy with grain, their heads bowing under the weight of growth, golden and full under the high sun. By autumn, the labor of many months was gathered into harvest, the culmination of careful tending, patience, and observation. In many cultures, the year was spoken of not in numbers or months, but in tasks and observable markers of time. People divided their calendars by action: plowing, planting, tending, and reaping. Each stage had its own pace, its own rituals, and its own rhythms, deeply embedded in daily life. Families and communities moved together in these cycles, coordinating labor and attention according to the needs of the season. Children learned from early on to notice subtle changes: the first warm gust of wind, the length of a shadow on a fence post, or the color of the horizon at sunset. These quiet observations informed decisions that would ripple across months, influencing planting schedules, watering, and eventual harvest. Even rest periods and celebrations were governed by the seasons, allowing life to flow in harmony with the natural world rather than against it. The night sky itself provided guidance. Constellations acted as celestial markers, a soft, unwavering clock for those attentive enough to observe. Orion, with his bright belt and steady presence, was noted by some as a signal for cutting grain, its appearance in the evening sky marking readiness. The Pleiades, small and clustered, indicators for sowing or reaping. Their movements across the heavens mirrored in the rotation of daily work. Even without formal instruments, people understood time through these patterns, aligning human effort with cosmic. A farmer might pause on a fence post at dusk, gaze at the heavens, and feel both reassurance and anticipation, aware that the right moment was imminent, yet patient for its natural unfolding. Such practices rooted human life in a calm understanding of continuity, showing that even laborious effort was part of a larger, dependable system. Each season brought its own texture, color, and sound. Spring mornings were scented with fresh rain and warming earth. Birds sang from budding trees, and the faint hum of insects began to stir. The soil was soft and yielding, yet alive with unseen activity, tiny roots intertwining beneath the surface. Farmers moved slowly, careful to disturb the tender shoots as they prepared the ground, planting seeds with steady hands and thoughtful attention. Summer afternoons, by contrast, were vibrant with warmth, the fields alive with golden light. Grain heads swayed rhythmically in the breeze, their movement accompanied by a chorus of insects, distant calls of livestock, and the low murmur of human voices coordinating labor. Sweat gathered on foreheads, yet the body moved in harmony with the day, guided by years of observation, routine, and the innate understanding of seasonal demands. Autumn brought a different kind of beauty: the soft rustle of dry stalks underfoot, the earthy fragrance of soil freshly turned, and the golden glow of low sun casting long shadows across the field. Harvest required coordinated effort, yet there was still room for reflection. Each sheaf collected, each basket filled, was both work and meditation. The rhythm of cutting, tying, and gathering became second nature, and amidst the physical exertion, there was space to notice subtleties: the shifting light across a dispenthal, the sound of a bird in flight, or the faint scent of the approaching frost. The season encouraged mindfulness, patience, and gratitude, reminding laborers that their efforts were part of a vast, enduring pattern. Winter offered rest and reflection. The fields lay dormant, often frosted or blanketed with snow. Yet, even in apparent stillness, the patterns of life continued. Seeds stored, tools repaired, and animals tended all sustained the cycle and prepared for the coming spring. Villagers gathered indoors, tending fires that crackled and glowed, sharing knowledge and memory, and passing down the quiet lessons of the year. Even in the cold, short days, there was comfort in knowing that the cycles would resume, that spring would again arrive, and that the rhythm of life would continue, slow and predictable. These quiet months were essential, a time for restoration, reflection, and preparation, allowing humans and land to rest together in harmony. Observing seasonal patterns was also an emotional experience. Farmers felt both the gentle reassurance of continuity and the humility of dependence. No matter how skillful or diligent, they could not summon rain, lengthen days, or hasten growth. Instead, They learned patience, an enduring awareness that their efforts were part of a larger system. The predictability of seasons offered a calm, stability. Spring would follow winter, summer would follow spring, and autumn would bring the fruits of patient care. Even setbacks, such as unexpected frost or drought, were absorbed into the broader understanding of natural rhythm. This perspective fostered resilience, teaching that effort and attentiveness were always rewarded in due course, in ways both visible and subtle. Children growing up in these patterns developed an intimate understanding of time. They noticed the subtle tilt of sunlight through the day, the gradual change in the length of shadows, and the progression of colors across fields and forests. They learned that life was cyclical, that patience was essential, and that careful observation could reveal when action was play was aligned with the seasons. Gentle games in spring and summer, quieter indoor activities in winter, and reflective walks through amber fields in autumn. Through these interactions, children absorbed both practical knowledge and emotional wisdom, preparing them for adult responsibilities in harmony with nature. Tasks were often synchronized with environmental cues. Planting was done after the last frost, or when soil moisture was ideal. Harvest followed the turning of the sun and the development of grain heads, with labor paced to coincide with daylight, temperature, and the readiness of the crop. Even subtle indicators, such as the color of leaves, the feel of air, or the behavior of animals, guided decision-making. These observations darned patience, attentiveness, and adaptability, yet provided a steady reassurance. The land was predictable in its cycles, and human effort, when aligned with natural rhythms, would bear fruit. The sensory qualities of the seasons shaped daily experience. Spring mornings smelled of warming earth and fresh growth. Summer afternoons shimmered with heat and golden light. Autumn carried the scent of dry stalks and cool wind. Winter brought crisp air, frost, and the soft hush of dormant fields. Each sense, sight, smell, touch, and sound reinforced awareness of the season, creating a calm immersion in the natural world. Observing these cues, laborers learned to synchronize their actions with life's natural rhythms, moving with the land rather than against it. In addition to practical benefits, awareness of seasonal patterns nurtured emotional well-being. The steady cycle provided a framework for life, a sense of stability and continuity that calmed worries and knowing that spring would return, that work would resume with renewed opportunity, and that each season offered its unique gifts, brought reassurance. The rhythm of life became a meditation in itself. Every action, from sowing to harvesting, was part of a larger, predictable cadence that intertwined labor, observation, and care. Even the smallest tasks were shaped by these rhythms. Fixing tools, tending animals, preparing storage, and repairing dwellings were all timed with the seasons. Work was paced, deliberate, and integrated into the natural flow of life. Humans moved with the cycles of light and temperature, aligning body and mind with external patterns. Daily routines, from rising at dawn to resting at dusk, were imbued with awareness of subtle environmental changes, and each action reinforced a sense of connection to the earth. The visual patterns our fields, skies, and landscapes also reinforced seasonal awareness. In spring, tilled soil and emerging shoots created a mosaic of color and texture. Summer offered a continuous expanse of green and gold, punctuated by flowers and insects. Autumn's amber and bronze hues reflected ripeness and readiness, while winter landscape provided a subdued palette, emphasizing rest and reflection. Observing these changes informed labor, guided decisions, and cultivated appreciation for the natural order. By observing these cycles closely, communities cultivated traditions that aligned with natural patterns. Festivals, offerings, and shared work rituals were timed with celestial markers, solstices, and equinoxes, reinforcing continuity and creating shared experience. Seasonal songs, stories, and meals became intertwined with work, embedding cultural knowledge into daily life and ensuring that the rhythms of nature were mirrored in human society. Through repeated observation, humans internalized the cadence of the seasons. Motion, effort, and attention became synchronized with natural patterns. The tilt of the sun guided timing, the smell of soil informed readiness, and the color of grain indicated the moment to reap. Each act of labor was not hurried but measured, performed in alignment with external rhythms. This practice nurtured mindfulness, resilience, and a deep appreciation for life's slow, dependable unfolding. Even as night approached, the patterns of the seasons remained evident. Stars appeared in familiar configurations, echoing the cycles observed during the day. Wind shifted, temperature fell, and the quiet of discallowed reflection on the passage of time. Observers felt grounded, aware of continuity, and comforted by the knowledge that life's rhythms would persist, offering guidance, reassurance, and a gentle structure to throughout the year. The steady turn of seasons shaped both practical action and emotional rhythm. Labor, rest, and celebration moved in gentle cycles, coordinated with the land's offerings. Awareness of these patterns brought calm, reducing uncertainty, fostering patience, and nurturing interconnection with the environment. Each season, each day, each small task became a note in a long, quiet symphony of continuity, presence, and care. Harvest was rarely an individual effort. It was a rhythm shared across generations, and children, though often tasked to wield a sickle or perform heavy labor, played their part gently and meaningfully. Their contributions were modest but essential. Some carried small jugs of water to workers under the sun, walking carefully so as not to spill a drop. Others gathered fallen stalks, sweeping the earth with small hands, arranging straw into neat, orderly piles. Even when their tasks were minimal, the children's presence shaped the atmosphere of the fields, infusing it with calm energy and attentive observation. The fields were both workplace and playground, and children navigated them with curiosity and care. Tall grasses offered hiding places for games, while soft piles of straw became cushions for brief rest or playful tumbling. Through these gentle interactions, children were slowly integrated into the rhythms of harvest life. The rhythm of labor provided a steady structure to each day, and children naturally mirrored this rhythm in their own scaled-down actions. As adults moved steadily across rows of grain, cutting, tying, and lifting, children performed miniature imitations, tying tiny bundles of stalks, arranging straw, or moving water jugs from point to point. These playful repetitions were not idle. They were lessons in technique, patience, and attentiveness. Elders often narrated softly as they worked, explaining the significance of each task, why the first sheaf was offered with reverence, how each grain would eventually become bread, and why care in every motion mattered. Children absorbed these teachings through observation and repetition, learning not from books, but from the land itself, the rhythm of work, and the subtle guidance of experienced adults. The sensory world of the fields provided children with rich, immersive learning. Warm sunlight on their skin, the soft rustle of stalks beneath their feet, the earthy scent of soil, the hum of insects, and the distant lowing of cattle or clucking of chickens all contributed to a holistic education. Touch became an essential teacher, feeling the weight and texture of stalks, the firmness or softness of soil, and the smooth surfaces of baskets and tools trained coordination and awareness. Sight was equally important, noticing in color as grains matured, the sway of stalks in the wind, and the patterns of light and shadow at crossfield encouraged observation and attentiveness. Sound played a role too. The rhythmic scraping of blades, the whisper of wind, and the gentle laughter of peers created a layered auditory map of labor, leisure, and learning. Together, these sensory impressions formed a deep, immersive education that shaped both body and mind. Games in the fields often mirrored ritualized behaviors, transforming play into preparation for future responsibilities. Children might tie small bundles of straw, imitating the careful binding of mature sheaves or trachy shapes in the soil, practicing the movements and coordination they would later use in serious work. Occasionally, games included symbolic reenactments of offering the first sheaf, distributing food, or participating in the rituals that marked milestones in the agricultural year. These playful acts embedded rhythm, attention, and cultural understanding in a gentle, non-verbal manner. Children learned that every gesture had meaning, that repetition cultivated skill, and that careful observation and imitation were as valuable as direct instruction. Observation was central to learning in the fields. Children watched elders closely, the angle of azakol, the method of tying a sheaf, the way water was poured carefully into jugs, and the pace maintained across long hours of labor. Even subtle details, the curve of a basket handle, the soft friction of stalks underfoot, or the arrangement of a bundle for storage were noticed and gradually internalized. Playful imitation allowed children to rehearse these skills safely. Over time, these repeated observations translated into intuition and competence, forming a foundation for both practical labor and understanding of seasonal cycles. The presence of children softened the atmosphere of labor. Their laughter, curiosity, and gentle energy introduced lightness to thus structured, repetitive tasks of the fields. Adults often slowed their movements or adjusted their guidance, explaining techniques more patiently or demonstrating care with humor. In return, children's attentiveness referred mindfulness among adults, creating a mutually reinforcing rhythm of calm and concentration. The interplay of observation, imitation, and gentle instruction cultivated an environment where learning, labor, and reflection coexisted seamlessly. Seasons shaped the experiences of children in the fields. In spring, they learned to observe emerging shoots, feeling the texture of soil, noting patterns in light and shadow, and witnessing the initial promise of the year. Summer provided lessons in endurance and observation. The sun's warmth, the weight of heavy stalks, and the constant rhythm of cutting and tying offered practical skill building alongside meditative patience. Autumn brought understanding of completion and gratitude as the ripened harvest was gathered, stored, and celebrated. Even winter offered reflection. Children could observe stored grain, participate in indoor tasks, or recall lessons from previous seasons, preparing for the cyclical return of work and life. Play continued to be an important avenue for learning. Children experimented with balance, coordination, and rhythm by moving bundles of straw, climbing fence posts, or chasing each other among the stalks. Through play, they enforced patterns, observed during labor, internalizing timing, technique, and attention. The repetition of these games across days and weeks cultivated patience, focus, and memory, preparing them for adult responsibilities in a natural, gentle manner. Through play and imitation, learning was embodied rather than abstract, intuitive rather than forced. The communal nature of work reinforced social learning. Children observed cooperation, empathy, and shared responsibility as adults coordinated tasks, passed tools, or shared food. Participating in small ways, carrying water, gathering stray stalks, helping organize baskets taught children the value of contribution to a collective effort. Mistakes were gently corrected, and successful efforts quietly praised, fostering resilience, confidence, and emotional intelligence. Children learned that attention, patience, and collaboration were as important as physical skill. Even the simplest sensory experiences carried lessons. The weight of a small bundle, the feel of soil between fingers, the warmth of sunlight, the scent of ripening grain, and the gentle sounds of the field, all contributed to holistic understanding. Children developed acute awareness of their environment, learning to adjust movements according to subtle cues. This heightened perception became essential for both practical and emotional development, fostering mindfulness.com and appreciation for the interconnectedness work, nature, and community. Children were also exposed to symbolic and ritual knowledge, the first sheaf offered for blessings, the songs accompanying labor, and the small ceremonies marking seasonal Melestinezwar, observed and often lightly participated in by children. Even playful imitations tying tiny bundles, arranging straw, or rehearsing gestures instilled understanding of cultural significance, reinforcing respect, continuity, and the quiet dignity of labor. Through repetition and gentle guidance, children internalized traditions with formal instruction, experiencing learning as a lived, sensory process. Observation, play, and gentle guidance allowed children to internalize the rhythms of labor and ritual. Each day's experiences added layers of knowledge, the correct handling of tools, the careful arrangement of grain, the timing of water or rest, and the subtle rhythms of collaborative work. This experiential learning fostered both competence and confidence. Children developed patience, attentiveness, and the capacity to participate meaningfully in adult tasks, blending practical skill with cultural understanding. By late afternoon, children often shifted from active participation to quiet observation or gentle play. They watched adults finishing tasks, tidied small areas, or carried minor items to the home or barn. These movements reinforced awareness, timing, and responsibility. Even brief rest periods offered opportunities for reflection, allowing children to consolidate skills, memory, and understanding of the day's work. Over time, this cyclical pattern embedded knowledge deeply, preparing them for greater participation and eventual mastery. Evening rituals reinforced lessons. Children helped carry small offerings, observed songs or prayers, or simply remained attentive to the calm conclusion of daily labor. These moments connected them to larger cycles of harvest, gratitude, and community, teaching that participation was both practical and symbolic. Through repeated involvement, children developed understanding of continuity, patience, and cultural rhythm. Sleep provided further consolidation. Children carried sensory, emotional, and practical impressions into rest. The texture of soil, the warmth of sun, the rustle of stalks, and the calm attention of elders became memories that shaped future competence and mindfulness. Night reinforced continuity. Tomorrow would bring repetition, observation, and gentle participation, embedding the cyclical, meditative rhythm of life in fields. Over years, these experiences shaped character as well as skill. Children internalized observation, empathy, and attentiveness. They understood that effort, timing, and mindfulness were intertwined, that the natural rhythm of the seasons guided work and life, and that continuity of practice was essential. Play, laughter, and observation were integral to learning, ensuring that children developed in balance, physically, emotionally, and cognitively. Through presence, participation, and gentle guidance, children became both witnesses and custodians of harvest culture. They absorbed lessons about patience, continuity, gratitude, and the interconnectedness of work, environment, and community. The calm, repetitive, and attentive nature of their engagement ensured that they would carry skills, values, and mindfulness into adulthood, perpetuating traditions and contributing meaningfully to communal life. As the sun set and evening shadows stretched across fields, children gradually left for cottages and homes, carrying sensory and emotional impressions of the day. The laughter, gentle work, observation, and playful imitation had created a coherent, immersive experience, laying a foundation for future participation. Through these slow, deliberate, and calm activities, children become attuned to the rhythms of life, labor, and learning, perpetuating a cycle of mindful, skilled, and cultural engagement. The harvest season carried with it many rhythms, from the quiet observation of seedlings in spring to the labor of reaping in summer, and the careful collection and storage in autumn. Among these moments, the cutting of the last sheaf held a unique place in the calendar of rural life. Just as the first sheaf had been treated with care and reverence, so too was the final bundle considered sacred, embodying both the spirit of the field and the enduring hope of renewal. In many regions, traditions surrounding the last sheaf were rich in symbolism. Families and communities approached the task slowly, mindful that this final act of harvesting marked both an ending and a promise of beginnings yet to come. The field itself seemed to respond to the significance of this moment. By late afternoon, the sun had begun its gentle descent, casting long, soft shadows across the rows of grain. The air was cooler than in the midday heat, carrying a faint earthy fragrance from the cut stalks and soil. The distant song of birds had softened, replaced by the quiet rustle of wind moving through remaining stalks, a natural accompaniment to the labor that had persisted all day. Even the animals seemed attuned to the pace of work, moving with calm deliberation. Oxen shifted slowly in their yokes. Chickens scratched quietly at the field's edge, and the occasional lowing of cows blended into the meditative soundscape. Everything seemed to pause with a sense of anticipation as the final bundle awaited careful cutting. Workers approached the last sheaf with deliberate care, aware of its symbolic weight. Sickles were held firmly but gently, tracing arcs through golden stalks in practiced motions. Each stroke was slow and considered, emphasizing respect over speed. In summer communities, the last stalks were bound together separately, tied with ribbon or cord, and decorated with flowers or herbs to signify fertility, abundance, and continuity. In other places, the sheaf was carefully shaped into a figure, corn doll or harvest mother, intended to guard the storehouse through winter. These rituals, though modest and quiet, were steeped in centuries of tradition, passed down orally from one generation to the next. The act of cutting the last sheaf was often communal. Workers gathered in a circle, pausing for a moment before beginning. Hands rested lightly on the golden stalks, as if to acknowledge their importance. Sometimes brief words of thanks were spoken, acknowledging the soil, sun, and rain that had contributed to the season's success. In other instances, a soft hum or chant accompanied the cutting, weaving music and movement into a children, often present at a distance, watched attentively, absorbing both the practical steps and the symbolic weight of the action. Elders guided hands that were less experienced, ensuring that the ceremony of closure was observed with calm reverence and careful attention. The sensory environment heightened the quiet significance of this moment. The sun, lowered toward the horizon, bathed the field in amber light, softening the color of the grain and casting elongated shadows that moved slowly. Across the earth, a faint breeze carried the subtle, sweet fragrance of ripening grain and freshly cut stalks. The tactile experience of holding the last sheaf, its smooth stalks, the gentle rustle of leaves, the occasional roughness of husks provided a sensory reminder of labor, patience, and care. Every motion, from cutting to binding, was deliberately slow, a meditation on Thissison's work and the cycles of nature that would continue long after the field lay bare for winter. The symbolism of the last sheaf extended beyond mere ritual. It embodied the spirit of the field, a Tangablu representation of abundance, resilience, and hope. Families stored it carefully through the winter, often placing it near the hearth, in a barn, or above doorways to protect the home and ensure fertility for the coming year. In some cultures, the sheaf was preserved intact, standing upright in a corner of the storage area. In others, it was broken down into small figures or charms, each carrying a piece of the field's essence. The act of preservation was as important as the cutting itself, reinforcing continuity, patience, and the intimate relationship between humans and the earth. Children's participation, while minimal in physical effort, was significant in cultural transmissions. They were often tasked with watching, observing, and learning. Some assisted by bringing small baskets of water, handing tools, or gently arranging stalks for decoration. More importantly, they absorbed Thurhitham gestures and quiet reverence of adults, internalizing lessons in respect, patience, and attentiveness. Through repeated observation over the years, they would inherit not just skill, but also the subtle understanding tradition that defined harvest life. Even their laughter and curiosity, while subdued, contributed to the common energy that enveloped the field during this solemn, yet peaceful, task. Communities treated the last sheaf with a blend of solemnity and quiet joy. While it marked the conclusion of labor, it was also a moment to celebrate fert and survival. The harvest season, though demanding, had yielded sustenance and security. In some villages, a small ceremony accompanied the final cutting. Simple offerings of bread, milk, or wine might be placed near the sheaf, honoring both the land and the laborers who had tended it. Music and song, often soft and reflective rather than raucous, might accompany the moment, reinforcing the meditative quality of the ritual. This blending of practicality and symbolic reverence highlighted the interconnectedness of daily labor and cultural tradition, grounding people in both utility and meaning. The preparation and decoration of the last chifaphon involved creative expression, though restrained and contemplative. Flowers, herbs, or grasses might be woven into the bundle, enhancing both its aesthetic and symbolic qualities. In some regions, the sheaf was shaped into a humanoid form, a harvest mother, representing the protective and nurturing spirit of the field. Each gesture, each careful placement of ribbon or bloom, emphasized attentiveness, patience, and continuity. Workers moved deliberately, maintaining a steady pace, mindful that haste would diminish the reverence of theme. The calm, focused work encouraged mindfulness, creating a quiet, shared meditation on the interdependence of human effort and natural cycles. The spatial arrangement of the field during the final cutting also contributed to the atmosphere. Workers often gathered around the last remaining stalks, forming a looser circle that emphasized unity and collective attention. Children might sit slightly apart, observing the adults' momentling, learning subtle techniques, and absorbing the significance of the ritual. Even the placement of tools, the careful arrangement of bundles, and the spacing of workers reflected intention and respect for the land. In this way, the final sheaf became a focal point, integrating both the practical aspects of harvesting and the meditative qualities of ritual observance. Seasonal changes were evident as the last sheaf was cut. The light of late afternoon and early evening softened, casting gentle hues across the landscape. Shadows lengthened slowly across the furrows, moving with the descending sun. A slight chill might drift through the air, carrying the scent of soil, grass, and ripening grain. The calm atmosphere was heightened by the diminished activity around Thifield, the quiet hum of the countryside, punctuated by distant sounds of animals returning to barns, created a sense of closure and reflection. In this setting, each movement, sound and breath contributed to a collective awareness of the harvest's completion and the cyclical rhythm of life. The tactile engagement of workers with last sheaf reinforced mindfulness, holding the stalks, feeling their weight and texture, and arranging them carefully for storage, provided a sensory anchor, connecting hands and mind to the land. Adults demonstratively gesture with deliberate care, ensuring that children, observers, and younger participants could learn not only the physical techniques, but also the attentiveness and patience necessary for meaningful labor. Every ribbon, gentle pat of flowers, and careful adjustment of stalks became a lesson in focus, reverence, and respect. The act of storing the last sheaf for winter carried additional meaning. Families often placed it in a prominent or protected location within the home or barn, ensuring that it would remain intact throughout the cold months. This storage was more than practical. It was symbolic, representing the continuity of life, protection of fertility, and the hope of future abundance. In some regions, the sheaf was positioned near the hearth to link warmth, sustenance, and protection. In others, it was stored in lofts or granaries, silently guarding home and ensuring that the next planting season would benefit from its presence. The quiet attention required in cutting, decorating, and storing the last sheaf provided a form of meditative practice. Each movement, each careful gesture, reinforced focus, patience, and mindfulness. Workers moved with measured rhythm, breathing in tandem with their motions, attuned to both the task at hand and the wider natural environment. The gentle light, cool air, and soft rustle of remaining stalks created a sensory experience that grounded participants in the presentment while connecting them to the continuity of agricultural life. The presence of children, observing and assisting gently, added to the contemplative atmosphere. Their curiosity, small gestures, and attentiveness created shared energy of learning and reflection. Elders guided their hands, corrected subtle errors, and encouraged patience, reinforcing the integration of practical skill, symbolic understanding, and emotional awareness through repeated exposure. Children internalized the meaning of the last sheaf, its connection to the land, its protective qualities, and its role in sustaining tradition and community. Even as night approached and the field quieted, the last sheaf remained a focal point of reflection. Its presence symbolized gratitude for labor completed, recognition of the land's generosity, and hope for future cycles. The calm reverence surrounding the sheaf reminded communities that harvest was not only a practical task, but also a cultural and spiritual practice, embedding lessons of patience, continuity, and mindfulness into daily life. After the hard work of harvest, when the last sheaf had been cut and stored, communities often engaged in quiet rituals of giving back. These were simple gestures, acts of attention and care, rather than displays of grandeur. A loaf of bread might be broken and buried at the edge of the field, a small measure of milk poured gently onto the soil, or a handful of the season's best grain scattered carefully along the furrows. Each gesture carried meaning, the acknowledgement that what had been taken from the land had been a gift, and that the land itself deserved respect and return. These offerings were not dramatic sacrifices. They were small, deliberate acts, performed with thoughtfulness, patience, and gentle reverence. They reminded people that survival depended not solely on labor, but on the maintenance of balance with the natural world. Imagine a farmer kneeling at the edge of a field, the soil cool beneath. Their hands, fingers press a loaf of bread into the earth, feeling the texture of crumb and crust mixing with the soil. Each motion is slow, deliberate, almost ritualistic. The farmer's gaze moves across the fields, noting the golden stubble of cut grain, the faint shimmer of dew still clinging to leaves, the soft movement of wind through stalks. A low murmur of thanks is offered to the unseen forces of growth, the rain that had fed the roots, the sun that had ripened the grains, the earth itself that had held and nurtured them. In this quiet act, there is recognition that human labor is intertwined with natural cycles, and that gratitude is a practical as well as an emotional response. Children, often present at a distance, observe carefully, absorbing both action and intention. They learn through watching and subtle participation, seeing that giving back is as important as gathering. A child might kneel beside an adult, placing a small crumb of bread into the soil, learning through imitation the gestures of care and reverence. In these moments, lessons extend beyond the physical task. They impart awareness of continuity, mindfulness, and empathy. Through repetition across seasons, children internalize the rhythm of giving and receiving, understanding that every harvest is a conversation between humans and the land, a dialogue expressed in careful, humble action. These offerings also serve a practical purpose. In many agrarian societies, scattering seeds from the best grain or adding small portions of composted material back into the field ensured fertility and continuity for the next year. The act of returning something tough soil was simultaneously symbolic and pragmatic. It reinforced abundance, preserved quality, and maintained harmony with natural cycles. Farmers understood that the land was not inert. It was responsive, alive, and deserving of attention. By giving back even a small fraction of what had been taken, they strengthened the partnership between human effort and environmental support. The sensory world, during these simple offerings, is subtle but rich. The texture of soil, crumbling between fingers, grounds the body and mind. The scent of damp earth, warmed by the sun and carrying faint traces of harvested grain, fills the air. The faint rustle of leaves or grass in the breeze provides a soft accompaniment, while distant birds and insects punctuate the quiet. Every sound, smell, and tactile sensation is part of the ritual, embedding the human experience within the larger context of the natural world. Movements are slow, attentive, and deliberate, emphasizing the connection between careened outcome. Communities often performed these gestures together, though they were quiet and reflective rather than noisy or performative. Neighbors might gather at the edge of a field, each offering a small gift to the earth, acknowledging the shared labor and shared bounty. There is an unspoken rhythm to these acts. One person places bread in the soil, another pours a small measure of milk, a third scatters seeds. Each motion flows into the next, creating a gentle choreography of gratitude and mindfulness. Children observe, adults teach, and Ivariana participes in the reinforcement of cultural memory and practical stewardship. The calm continuity of these reinforces social cohesion, reminding people that they are part of a wider, interconnected cycle of labor, sustenance, and life. The ritual of offerings also extends to the domestic sphere. After returning a portion of harvest to the fields, families might offer small tokens of gratitude indoors. A slice of bread might be placed near a hearth, or a small dish of milk left out for domestic spirits or guardian forces. Though these acts were subtle and quiet, they carried the same underlying message, the acknowledgement that human life is interdependent with forces of nature, and that attentiveness, gratitude, and care maintain harmony. Children learn by observing, internalizing a sense of responsibility and reverence that shapes their understanding of everyday life. Even in areas without formal religious or symbolic practices, these offerings served as a meditation on humility and patience. Kneeling, bending, pressing bread into the soil, or pouring a gentle stream of milk requires focus, care, and attention. To detail the repetition of these gestures across days, months, and seasons cultivates mindfulness. Adults and children alike become attuned to the small shifts in weather, soil, and plant growth, understanding that attentive observation is inseparable from the act of care. In this way, the simple offerings become a form of slow education, reinforcing observation, patience, and reverence as core values within agrarian life. Seasons influence the manner and meaning of these offerings. In early autumn, the earth is still warm, receptive to nourishment, and the act of returning a small portion of harvest is a natural extension of ongoing care. By late autumn or early winter, soil may be colder, drier, or less receptive, and the act becomes symbolic as much as practical a gesture of trust that the earth will receive and protect. Over repeated years, these seasonal patterns create a rhythm of attention and continuity, embedding understanding of environmentalists into the collective memory of communities and individuals alike. Children's participation strengthens and cultural development. Beyond observing, they might assist in minor tasks, placing crumbs, scattering seeds, or carrying small portions of milk. These small, careful actions teach focus, coordination, and a sense of responsibility. More importantly, children internalize an ethic of reciprocity, understanding that the benefits of labor come with a responsibility to give back, to maintain balance, and to honor continuity. In these simple acts, practical skill and moral understanding intertwine, quietly shaping character over time. The quietness of the ritual is essential. Unlike the loud celebrations that sometimes accompany harvest completion, these offerings are deliberate, reflective, and intimate. There is no hurry, no competition, no display. Each gesture is small, yet meaningful. The soil absorbs the action as well as the intention, reinforcing the sense that human effort and natural processes are partners. In this calm atmosphere, learning is implicit. Children watch, adults guide gently, and everyone participates in a slow, meditative acknowledgement of continuity. The offering's thumbs vary by culture and context. In some regions, bread and milk are the primary gifts. In others, small fruits, nuts, or portions of harvested grain serve the purpose. Occasionally, water from nearby streams is poured carefully onto furrows, blending practicality with symbolism. Each act, no matter how modest, carries a message of humility, care, and respect. The repetition of these acts across generations ensures that they are internalized as a natural part of harvest life, quietly shaping social and environmental understanding. Spatial awareness plays a role as well. Farmers consider where to place offerings: at the edge of a field, near a furrow, or close to a significant tree or stone. Placement is intentional, ensuring that the act is visible to observers and symbolic in its context. Children learn to attend to these details, understanding that small gestures of thoughtfulness and attention carry meaning beyond the immediate physical act. Through careful observation and subtle participation, they internalize both practical skill and cultural values, weaving continuity, mindfulness, and carry into daily life. The repetition of these rituals across years deepens their meaning. Each season, as harvest ends and offerings are returned to the earth, people become more attuned to natural rhythms and cycles. They notice subtle differences in soil texture, the timing of rain, or the growth patterns of grain. This attentive observation, reinforced through quiet ritual, strengthens both practical skill and cultural understanding. Children learn to interpret the world through careful attention, patience, and respect, developing a sense of continuity and responsibility that extends beyond individual tasks to encompass community and environment. Evenings in Theafield provide additional sensory reinforcement. The cool air, muted light, and gentle rustle of residual stalks underscore the contemplative quality of the ritual. Farmers pause to appreciate the work completed, the quietude of the moment, and the interconnectedness of labor, land, and life. Children observe these pauses as lessons in reflection and mindfulness. The rhythm of attention work, offering observation, reflection creates a coherent pattern that shapes both skill and character, ensuring that knowledge and values are transmitted gently, organically, and with deep cultural resonance. The emotional dimension of these simple offerings is subtle, but gratitude, humility, and patience are conveyed through movement, gesture, and attention rather than words. The act of giving back, even in small measure, fosters a sense of connection to both community and environment. Children learn empathy and responsibility through witnessing and participating in these rituals, internalizing the understanding that human effort is inseparable from respect for the natural world. Through these small, deliberate acts, harvest life is extended beyond the practical. It becomes a meditation on balance, continuity, and attentiveness. Children, adults, and elders alike participate in a gentle cycle of giving and receiving. Bread returned to the earth nourishes both soil and spirit. Milk poured onto furrows reinforce attentiveness and care, and scattered seeds promise future growth. The quiet rhythm of offering instills a sense of harmony, teaching that human labor is not an isolated act, but part of a larger network of life, time, and community. Even the smallest gestures, pressing a loaf into soil, pouring milk in a slow stream, or scattering seeds by hand, require attention, deliberation, and care. Each movement reinforces the values of patience, mindfulness, and respect. Children internalize these lessons without formal instruction, learning through embodied experience. By observing, participating, and reflecting, they develop both practical skill and a sense of ethical responsibility toward the land and community. In conclusion, the simple offerings to the earth after harvests represent the calm, reflective side of agrarian life. They are quiet, deliberate, and meaningful gestures, reinforced continuity, mindfulness, and reciprocity. Through these acts, children and adults alike learn that survival and abundance depend on care, attention, and respect for the land that sustains them. The small, repeated actions of giving back create a rhythm of gratitude and reflection, embedding knowledge, values, and emotional understanding deeply within the fabric of daily life. As the long day of harvest drew to a close, the landscape softened under the slowly fading light of dusk. The fields, once filled with movement and sound, became quiet, their golden stubble glimmering faintly in the last beams. Tools were set aside, carefully arranged or leaned against posts, resting as much as their human caretakers. There was a rhythm to this moment, a transition from labor to reflection, from the open air to the intimacy of the home. Families slowly made their way indoors, shedding the dust of soil and sweat, carrying the gentle exhaustion that comes from work done with care and mindfulness. In every village, from Roman villas to Celtic clearings, the hearth was the center of domestic life, a soft anchor around which the day's activity. The hearth itself, a low stone or clay structure in many homes, glowed with steady warmth. Its embers flickered gently, casting long, dancing shadows along the walls. Smoke, faint and fragrant from carefully tended fires, mingled with the scent of recently baked bread and dried herbs hung to season the coming months. The firelight illuminated faces marked with quiet fatigue, but also with calm satisfaction. These were not grand feasts or moments of revelry, but gentle, domestic ceremonies of closure. Children gathered near the warmth, eyes-heavy with sleep, listening to the low murmur of conversations or the soft, crackling rhythm of firewood settling. The air was cool beyond the walls, but the hearth radiated comfort, a tactile reminder that labor was always paired with rest, and toil was rewarded not with applause but with warmth and sustenance. Meals were simply yet nourishing. Stews of lentils, barley, or pulses simmered gently in clay pots, infused with the aromatic herbs off gardens carefully tended throughout the year. Loaves of bread, baked earlier from freshly harvested grain, released warmth and fragrance, their crusts golden and firm, interiors soft and sustaining. Families shared food in measured portions, mindful that abundance was both precious and fleeting. The act of eating together, thokiot, was deeply ritualized. Passing bowls, breaking bread, and sipping water or milk became expressions of care, connection, and acknowledgement of shared labor. Children learned to wait patiently, to appreciate flavors, and to observe the subtle etiquettes of domestic life, internalizing lessons in gratitude, cooperation, and mindfulness. While meals nourished the body, the evening routines tended to other aspects of household life. Clothing, worn and sometimes frayed from the day's work, was mended beside the hearth. Fingers threaded needles with calm precision, repairing garments for the next season. Tools were sharpened, their blades and edges restored with deliberate care, echoing the earlier attentiveness of the harvest itself. Even the twist of thread, the grind of stone, the smoothing of a handle contributed to a rhythm of quiet reflection, reinforcing the understanding that labor continued beyond the field, extending into the cultivation, home, and community. Conversations during hearthside evenings were gentle and purposeful, rarely rushed or adults spoke in low tones, recounting events of the day, discussing weather and soil, or reflecting on the subtle changes observed in the growth of crops. Sometimes, elders shared stories of ancestors who had worked the same lands, who had experienced the same seasonal patterns, and who had preserved rituals and knowledge across generations. These narratives were not dramatic or tense. They were calm accounts of continuity and resilience. Children absorbed them with wide, sleepy eyes, their imaginations quietly nurtured by the cadence offwards, the warmth of firelight, and the intimacy of shared space. Through these stories, history became tangible, embodied in memory and imagination rather than in texts or scrolls. The evening's soundscape was gentle and deliberate. Outside, owls called softly from nearby trees, their voices echoing in the cooling air. Rivers, barely visible under the starlit sky, moved steadily, carrying water and reflection alike. Occasionally, the rustle of a cater dog moving indoors, the gentle shifting of a child in sleep, or the murmur of wind through window shutters punctuated the quiet. These subtle, natural, and domestic sounds created a layered harmony, embedding awareness of the broader environment into the domestic sphere. Families existed not as isolated units, but as participants in a slow, ongoing conversation with the land and sky, the elements, and the rhythm of seasons. Children often drifted toward sleep near the fire, their small forms curled on mats, rugs, or blankets, eyes heavy but attentive in the fading light. Some rested their heads against the knees of parents or grandparents, absorbing warmth, and even as sleep beckoned, the lessons of the day, observation, attentiveness, gratitude lingered. Children internalized not only the practical knowledge of household and field, but also the emotional tone of the evening, calm reflection, measured movement, and gentle attentiveness to both human and environmental needs. In this pathside, evenings served as classrooms without walls, teaching mindfulness, patience, and empathy. The progression from day to night was deliberate and unhurried. Fires were maintained at low, steady warmth, providing both heat and light, while avoiding the distraction of overwhelming brightness. The household moved slowly, attending to essential tasks, settling children, and tending to domestic necessities. The interplay of shadows and light created a soft visual rhythm, encouraging both calm reflection and physical ease. In this atmosphere, conversations flowed naturally. Laughter was quiet and gentle, and moments of solitude were honored as part of communal life. Adults and children alike learned the value of quiet attentiveness, understanding that life's rhythm included both labor and rest, speech and silence. Even small domestic rituals carried significance. Pouring water into bowls for washing hands, stirring pots carefully, or adjusting hearth embers required slow, mindful movement. These gestures connected the individual to the household to the community, and all to the wider natural world. The tactile and sensory engagement, feeling through a myth of water, observing firelight on walls, noting the texture of food reinforced awareness of presence and participation. In these understated routines, the philosophy of calm, attentive living was embedded into daily life, shaping character, memory, and cultural continuity. The evening was also a time for reflection on work completed. Adults considered the fields harvested, the tools maintained, and the routines followed. Satisfaction was quiet, expressed not in grand exclamations, but in the measured acknowledgement of effort and outcome. Children, watching and participating in minor tasks, absorbed these attitudes, learning that labor's reward is soft and subtle. The warmth of a fire, the nourishment of food, and the quietude of shared domestic space. Even fatigue was reframed as a gentle acknowledgement of life's rhythms rather than a burden, reinforcing the interconnectedness of work, rest, and learning. Sometimes, evenings included storytelling not just of ancestors but of mythic or symbolic accounts related to the land. Tales of seasons, agricultural deities, or folk heroes were showed softly, their rhythm and repetition making them suitable for the end of a long day. Words were slow and deliberate, emphasizing cadence and attention rather than drama. Children absorbed not only narrative content, but also the emotional and cultural tone, learning the importance of calm reflection, the subtleties of tradition, and the value of quiet observation. Storytelling became a bridge between practical knowledge and moral or cultural understanding, blending imagination with lived experience. As night deepened, the hearth's light dimmed further, embers glowing faintly, smoke curling lazily upward. Outside, the natural world responded, thawed, softened. Nocturnal animals moved in quiet rhythms, and stars emerged, twinkling in the clear night sky. Inside, the household adjusted to the approaching sleep of the day's end. Mats were arranged, blankets pulled gently over resting bodies, and final small tasks, tidying tools, covering pots, or extinguishing candles were performed with calm care. The interplay of human and natural rhythms emphasized the cyclic nature of daily life. Work, nourishment, reflection, and rest were bound together in a coherent, gentle flow. The smell of smoke, bread, and herbs lingered long after the day's activities concluded, embedding memory and comfort into their household environment. Children, now asleep, carried the sensory imprint into dreams, warmth, sustenance, and gentle human care. Adults, sitting quietly by embers or preparing for rest themselves, reflected on both the work accomplished and the continuity of domestic and agricultural life. These evenings reinforced the understanding that the harvest extended beyond the field, permeating domestic, social, and cultural dimensions of life. The slow pace of hearthside evenings allowed reflection on the passage of time and the rhythm of seasons, observing light fading, embers cooling, and the gradual hush of activity. Adults and children alike internalized an awareness of continuity, patience, and harmony. The household itself became a microcosm of the larger world, attentive, careful, and interconnected with the cycles of nature. These moments cultivated mindfulness, reinforced social bonds, and embedded cultural and practical knowledge deeply within family life. Even in the simplest homes, where possessions were few and spaces modest, the hearth served as a center for memory, observation, and calm reflection. The presence of warmth, food, and companionship created a stable anchor at the day's end. Familiar, a shared rhythm that extended beyond individual experience, connecting them to tradition, natural cycles, and the subtle lessons of attentive living. Children internalize values of care, patience, and observation. Adults reinforced them through example and guidance. The gentle cadence of the evening mirrored the natural cycles of labor, growth, and renewal. By the time sleep descended fully, the household was quiet and still, embers glowing faintly and occasional whispers of conversation fading into murmurs. The night carried the residue of the day's work, the satisfaction of completion, and the quiet promise of tomorrow's tasks. Hearthside evenings, in their calm and contemplative rhythms, were as important to the life of harvest communities as any labor in the fields. They nurtured both body and mind, embedding experience, knowledge, and values into memory through repetition, attention, and gentle care. Even as the household drifted into slumber, the legacy of today's work persisted. Tools ready for tomorrow, food nourishing the body, children learning through observation, and adults reflecting on continuity, patience, and gratitude. The hearth's warmth lingered, both physically and symbolically, emphasizing the importance of domestic space in the rhythm of agrarian life. Through these slow, intentional evenings, generations absorbed a philosophy of life that balanced work with rest, labor with reflection, and human effort with appreciation of natural cycles. In this quiet, reflective environment, the memory of the day's labor and harvest was preserved in both physical and emotional terms. The smell of bread and herbs, the glow of firelight, the tactile engagement with domestic tasks, and the calm presence of family created a sensory and cultural imprint. Children carried these experiences into adulthood, reproducing thesum rhythms with their own families and ensuring continuity of tradition. Adults passed on practical knowledge alongsst values of patience, care, and attentiveness. Hearthside evenings were therefore a crucible for learning, memory, and cultural continuity, blending the practical, emotional, and symbolic into a seamless, general experience. Once the grain had been gathered and safely stored, a new rhythm emerged in the lives of villagers. The slow, deliberate movement of goods, neighbors, and families into shared marketplaces. These markets were not grand or noisy spectacles, but modest gatherings, carefully timed to follow the completion of harvests. Across Europe, Asia, and the Mediterranean, the appearance of market days marked the transition from labor to exchange, from private effort to communal sharing. Village squares, dusty roads, and modest town centers filled gradually, not with clamor, but with the quiet, purposeful presence of people attending to their trade. Stalls were erected with care, woven from wicker, wood, or cloth, and arranged to allow easy movement while showcasing the fruits au flabber, sacks of grain, bundles of herbs, freshly baked bread, jars of honey, and simple textiles. The smell of the market was a gentle symphony of domestic and agricultural life. Bread, warm from ovens, carried its comforting aroma across the square. Herbs dried in the sun released their fragrances slowly, mixing with the earthy scent of grain and the faint tang of animal hides. The subtle fragrance of ripened fruits, apples, pears, and figs mingled with this, creating a sensory experience that was both nourishing and calming. These scents, layered and gentle, reminded villagers of the cycle of seasons, of work well done, and of the steady continuity of rural life. Farmers arrived with sacks of wheat, barley, or oats, each bag heavy yet carried with pride. They moved slowly, mindful of their steps, setting down their goods with deliberate care to avoid spilling kernels or damaging fragile containers. The act of presenting grain was itself ceremonial. Each bundle represented months of patient labor, careful tending, and attentiveness to the land. Sellers and buyers exchanged polite greetings, small smiles, and gentle nods. Haggling, when it occurred, was calm and measured, more a practice of negotiation and respect than of conquest or speed. Coins clinked softly into small hands. Sacks were exchanged with steady arms, and transactions unfolded in a rhythm that matched the slow, measured pace of life itself. Children accompanied rents to markets, their small hands clutching coins or tokens earned over the year. Some carried little baskets of nuts, berries, or eggs to trade, learning early the practicalities of commerce. For them, the market was both a classroom and a playground. They observed carefully, noting how adults weighed goods, measured grain, and judged the quality of produce. They noticed subtle gestures, the tilt of a scale, the firmness of bread, or the smoothness of a clay jar. Through this observation, they absorbed lessons in attentiveness, patience, and judgment. Even the simple act of walking among stalls, observing transactions, and listening to quiet conversations nurtured an understanding of community, responsibility, and the slow, deliberate rhythm of animals were part of the market's life, though they added to its calm rather than its noise. Oxen and cows tethered patiently, chewed hay, or shifted their weight, occasionally emitting low, measured sounds. Goats and sheep bleated softly, while chickens clucked near baskets of eggs or grains. The presence of these creatures reminded buyers and sellers alike that agricultural life extended beyond human hands. It included care for animals, attention to their needs, and the integration of livestock into household economies. Children, fascinated, sometimes followed the gentle movements of animals, learning that every element of the farm from plant to creature had its place in the delicate balance of village life. The visual rhythm of the marketplace was composed of gentle repetition and subtle order. Rows of stalls created pathways, guiding visitors slowly through its offerings. Clay pots lined edges, hand-woven baskets balanced on wooden posts, and piles of fresh herbs weighed lightly in the breeze. Fruits were arranged in pyramids, grains in neat sacks, and textiles folded carefully revealed colors and patterns. Villagers paused often, not out of impatience, but to examine goods with touching the surface of a jar, lifting a basket, or pressing gently on a loaf of bread connected the observer to the materiality of labor, reinforcing the link between effort, result, and appreciation. Even small marketplaces maintained an unspoken etiquette. Buyers approached sellers respectfully, acknowledging their effort and the value of their goods. Sellers, in turn, presented their items with care, understanding that each transaction was a quiet affirmation of mutual dependence. There was no rush. Movement through the market was slow, steady, and deliberate. Conversations were low, measured, and infused with attentiveness. One could hear the faint scrape of wooden carts across cobblestones, the occasional clink of a coin, and the soft rustle of fabrics or grain shifting in sacks. These sounds, subtle and continuous, created a gentle, auditory backdrop, soothing tough mind, while reinforcing the sense of community and shared purpose. Across regions, market practiced effort slightly, but shared a common emphasis on care, rhythm, and continuity. In Northern Europe, market stalls were often small and low, designed for easy access and gentle handling. In Mediterranean towns, merchants displayed fruits and herbs under cloth awnings to protect them from sun, and small trays of coins and weights were used with careful attention. In Asia, bamboo or wooden trays showcased rice, tea, or dried fruits, while buyers inspected each offering with calm diligence. Regardless of locale, the emphasis was on steady, mindful activity rather than spectacle. The market was a place of connection and exchange, not of frenzy or haste. Sellers often took pride in presentation, arranging their goods in simple but aesthetically pleasing ways. Bundles of herbs were tied neatly, grains poured evenly into baskets, and baked goods were stacked with attention to symmetry and stability. This care extended beyond appearance. It demonstrated respect for the product, for the labor it represented, and for those who might purchase it. Buyers recognized these subtle cues, understanding that careful presentation reflected both quality and trustworthiness. Children, observing, or resisting, absorbed these lessons, learning that beauty, order, and attentiveness were not mere aesthetics. Butana grew to communal life and ethical practice. Markets were also places of knowledge transmission. Farmers advice on crop rotation, irrigation, and storage techniques. Bakers might discuss the nuances of grain quality or leavening practices. Artisans shared insights on weaving, pottery, or tool repair. Each conversation was a soft thread weaving individual knowledge into communal wisdom. Children listened quietly, absorbing thurkatham and content of these exchanges, internalizing patterns of observation, inquiry, and reflection. In this way, markets were not only centers of material exchange, but also hubs of learning, reinforcing continuity. The pace of movement in markets was deliberately unhurried. Villagers walked slowly along stalls, pausing frequently to inspect goods, converse, or rest. Children occasionally ran short distances to greet friends or retrieve items, yet the overall tempo remained calm and deliberate. Even during peak activity, the marketplace possessed a sense of order and rhythm. This slow, steady pace allowed observation, reflection, and mindful decision. Each action, from selecting a loaf of bread to weighing a handful of grain, became a small meditation on patience, care, and attention to detail. Markets also served a social function beyond commerce. Neighbors exchanged news, shared updates on harvest conditions, and discussed weather patterns. Elders offered required advice to younger families. Children learned the nuances of social interaction, from greeting and listening to expressing thanks and recognizing authority. The marketplace became a living classroom for both practical skills and social etiquette, teaching participants to navigate human relationships with calm attentiveness. Through repeated observation and participation, children learned empathy, negotiation, and community responsibility. The marketplace was alive with subtle sensory detail. The texture of woven baskets, the scent of baked bread, the weight of grain in hands, and the soft glint of coins all contributed to a tactile, multi-sensory experience. The eye moved across color and shape, golden wheat, deep green herbs, red apples, and rich clay pottery. The ears heard measured clinking, the faint hum of conversation, and the gentle shuffle of feet and hooves. This layering of sensory information created a calming environment, stimulating reflection and mindfulness rather than distraction or overwhelm. As the day progressed, the sun shifted across the sky, casting slow-moving shadows that lengthened along stalls and pathways. Vendors adjusted awnings or repositioned goods to maintain optimal light and visibility. Buyers moved correspondingly, pausing in shaded areas to rest or consider their selections. This natural ebb and flow reinforced the day's rhythm. Periods of attention and activity followed by quiet pauses and reflection. The marketplace itself became a mirror of natural cycles, echoing the steady transitions observed in fields, rivers, and seasons. Children, in particular, absorbed the rhythm of the market in ways both conscious and subtle. Watching adults weigh, measure, and exchange, they learn oppression and attentiveness. By carrying small items, assisting with tasks, or observing transactions, they acquired both practical and ethical knowledge. They learned that care, patience, and respect were as important as skill, and that community functioned best when individuals honored both material and social responsibilities. In this way, the marketplace reinforced not only economic continuity, but also cultural and moral lessons, quietly transmitted from one generation to the next. Evening brought a gentle winding down of activity. Stalls were gradually dismantled, goods were returned to homes or storage, and animals were led away from the square. Thea, previously filled with layered scents and subtle activity, became quieter, carrying the gentle sounds of retreating footsteps and the occasional low call of a distant animal. Villagers returned home, their baskets and sacks filled not only with material provisions, but also with the calm satisfaction of measured, mindful exchange. The marketplace's purpose, connection, sustenance, learning was quietly fulfilled, leaving behind a residual sense of order, rhythm, and continuity. Markets after the harvest, in this sense, were far more than places of trade. They represented the extension of labor into community life, the translation of individual effort into collective sustenance, and the embodiment of careful observation, attentiveness, and care. They reinforced the principles that underpinned agrarian life: patience, mindfulness, respect for resources, and awareness of children observed, participated, and learned, gradually internalizing a philosophy of life that balanced work, exchange, reflection, and social harmony. As night fell, the market emptied completely. Shadows steepened across the square, stars appeared faintly overhead, and the air cooled. Yet the lessons of the Dailingard, the rhythm of trade, the subtle sensory environment, the ethical and practical considerations of exchange, and the quiet satisfaction of labor transformed into sustenance and community. For all Hoppertists, from children to elders, the marketplace was a space where effort, mindfulness, and shared purpose converged, leaving an enduring impression that would carry forward into future harvests and seasons. Harvest was never truly complete until the last sheaf of grain had been carefully gathered and stored. The act ostrich was both practical and symbolic, representing the culmination of months of patient labor, observation, and care. Granaries, whether constructed from wood, clay, or wattle and daub, rose quietly from the landscape, modest but essential. Many were built raised above the earth on short stilts or stone foundations to protect against damp rodents and the slow encroachment of decay. Their walls, thick and often lined with clay or straw, held the steady, dry coolness necessary to preserve the precious harvest. Inside, woven bins, sacks, and ceramicures waited to be filled, each one a vessel carrying the season's work and the promise of sustenance through the long, quiet months of winter. These storage spaces were not only functional, they were imbued with the care, attention, and rhythm of the communities that tended them. The process of storing grain began even before Thapha's kernels were placed in bins. Sheaves were left to dry in the sun, sometimes standing upright in small stacks known as stooks or shocks, allowing air to circulate through the stalks. The gentle warmth of the late summer sun drew out moisture, protecting the seeds from mold and spoilage. Children often ran between the stooks, carrying small baskets of grain or straw, mimicking the motions of older family members while learning the importance of patience, careful handling, and respect for the material. Even these small tasks carried weight. Spilled kernels were carefully gathered, chaff removed slowly, and stalks placed in neat piles. The rhythm of these motions, repeated day after day, embedded a sense of attentiveness and care that shaped both skill and inside granaries. The sound of grain moving was gentle and soothing. Kernels poured steadily from baskets or sacks into storage bins, creating a soft, continuous patter, reminiscent of a gentle rain. Workers tilted and tapped containers, ensuring that the grain settled evenly and that no pockets of air or damp remained. The air inside was warm and slightly earthy, scented faintly of straw, wood, and the sweetness of dried grain. Even the smallest details mattered, sweeping the floors clean before filling bins, checking jars for cracks, and ensuring that lids fit snugly, all contributed to the longevity and quality of the harvest. These careful, deliberate actions reinforced a sense of rhythm and mindfulness, linking human labor to natural cycles of growth and preservation. Families often worked together during this time, each member taking on a role appropriate to their abilities. Adults carried heavier loads, adjusted bin positions, or oversaw drying techniques, while children participated by transferring grain between containers or tidying storage spaces. Elders supervised, quietly offering guidance, ensuring that care and precision were maintained. There was little need for words, as the rhythm of work itself communicated priorities, patience, attention, and reverence for the material. In this calm cooperation, children learned not only the technical aspects of storage, but also the emotional and ethical dimensions of labor's importance, of respect, responsibility, and attentiveness to both natural and human systems. Story practice varied across cultures, yet the underlying principles were remarkably similar. In Mediterranean regions, clay jars sealed with wax or pitch preserved wheat and barley, keeping out moisture and pests. In northern Europe, wooden granaries lined with straw and elevated on stone or timber foundations protected oats and rye. In Asia, bamboo and woven baskets, suspended or placed on raised platforms, ensured ventilation while safeguarding the. Despite differences in material and construction, each method reflected careful observation of environmental conditions, attentiveness to detail, and the slow accumulation of knowledge across generations. These techniques were quietly celebrated. In practice, they were the tangible result of centuries of learning, observation, and mindful attention to both natural and human-made systems. The act of storing grain was also steeped in ritual, though it was subtle and understated. As workers moved grain into bins, they often paused to touch the material, feeling its weight and texture, acknowledging the effort it represented. Some cultures included small offerings or blessings during storage, scattering a few seeds on the floor, placing a loaf atop the list sheaf, or whispering thanks for the season's bounty. These gestures reinforced the idea that the harvest was solely human achievement, but a collaboration with the land, weather, and broader cycles of life. Children, observing or participating, absorbed both the practical and symbolic lessons, learning to see labor as an interaction with the world, rather than merely a task to be completed. The sensory environment of granaries was sonically calming. The warm, earthy smell of dried grain mingled with faint traces of straw and wood. The sound of grain settling, sifting, and moving created a continuous, gentle rhythm, soothing to the mind and body. Light filtered through small windows or gaps in walls, creating patterns that shifted as containers were moved. The temperature inside remained steady, protected from the extremes outside, encouraging a slow, deliberate pace of work. Even in the simplest structures, the combination of smell, sound, and touch produced a quiet, meditative atmosphere, reinforcing mindfulness and attentiveness. Children, while performing minor tasks, also absorbed lessons in foresight and planning. They learned that grain, once stored, must last months without spoiling. They observed adults testing containers, stacking sacks carefully, and ensuring ventilation. Through this, children internalized the importance of patience, care, and responsibility. These lessons extended beyond the practical. They shaped attitudes toward work, attention to detail, and respect for the cycles of life. Children understood that well-being of the household depended on careful, sustained action, and that each kernel stored represented effort and trust in the future. As bins and jars filled steadily, the sense of accomplishment in the household grew. The work was tiring but rewarding. Every scoop of grain represented not only months of toil, but, preparation for the months ahead. Families took moments to rest, leaning against wooden posts, or sitting on benches to feel the warmth of the sun or the calm of the shaded interior. Conversations were quiet, often about subtle observations, the color of the grain, the dryness of the straw, or the patterns of airflow through the granary. These discussions, gentle and deliberate, reinforced shared knowledge and communal memory, ensuring that each generation carried forward both practical and cultural wisdom. Storage was more than an end-of-a-season task. It marked the threshold between abundance and winter scarcity. The carefully maintained grain represented security and continuity, a guarantee that the household could weather months of limited resources. Adults often reflected on the journey of the harvest, from planting and tending to cutting and drying, concluding with this act of preservation. The emotional weight of storage was subtle. Relief, satisfaction, and quiet pride intertwined, creating a sense of calm, accomplishment that permeated both home and hearth. Children, watching and participating, learned to associate patient, careful work with tangible rewards and emotional fulfillment. In some households, particular attention was given to the selection of grain for specific uses. The best kernels might be set aside for seed, ensuring the continuation of quality crops. Others were destined for daily bread, for sale, or for trade. The sorting process required attentiveness and discernment, further emphasizing patience and care. Children observed closely, noting the differences in texture, color, and weight. Over time, these small observations built a foundation of agricultural knowledge that would sustain them in adulthood. The tactile and visual engagement reinforced the lessons of careful observation, methodical action, and attentive living. Familiars also took care to maintain the environment of storage spaces. Floors were swept, walls inspected, and bins periodically adjusted to prevent pests or dampness. The process required steady, deliberate movement, attention to detail, and anticipation of potential problems. In observing and assisting, children internalized principles of foresight, responsibility, and maintenance, learning that care extended beyond immediate action to In this way, storage became both practical and educational, embedding skill, patience, and mindfulness into daily life. As the day wore on, and the last of the grain was tucked into bins and jars. Households often paused to observe the work completed. The granary stood as a quiet monument to the season, organized, clean, and filled with the fruits of patient labor. Adults reflected on accomplishments without haste or dramatization, noting the steady progress, careful attention, and reliability of both human and environmental. Children absorbed these attitudes, internalizing the value of slow, deliberate work, and understanding that the accumulation of effort over time produced stability, sustenance, and security. The process of storing grain was interwoven with the rhythm of the household and the natural world. As sunlight faded, shadows lengthened, and temperatures cooled, the granary maintained its role as a calm, secure space. The tactile engagement, rhythmic pouring of grain, and subtle scents all reinforced attentiveness and mindfulness. Children observed these rhythms, learning that daily action, care, and attention contributed to larger cycles of life. This understanding extended beyond practical knowledge to include ethical and emotional awareness, patience, responsibility, and gratitude for the land and labor. By the time storage work was complete, the household had achieved a sense of closure and calm. Every kernel placed in a bin represented months of observation, care, and careful execution. Every jar, sealed or basket filled, carried the assurance of sustenance and continuity. Children drifted toward rest, absorbing lessons of skill, attentiveness, and care through participation and observation. Adults reflected quietly on the rhythms of work, the subtle accomplishments of the day, and the ongoing cycles that would shape future seasons. The granary itself stood as a symbol of continuity, patience, and the gentler rhythm of agrarian life. In essence, the act of storing grain was not merely a practical task, but a culmination of a season's rhythm. From planting, tending, harvesting, to drying and cleaning, every step required careful attention and deliberate motion. The storage process encapsulated these values, transforming the physical act of preservation into a ritual of reflection, mindfulness, and continuity. Children absorbed lessons in both skill and ethics, ensuring that knowledge, care, and tradition would carry forward. Adults reinforced these principles through example, attention, and patient guidance, creating an environment where work and reflection coexist. By evening, granaries stood filled, the household quieted, and the season's work rested safely within human care. Every container, jar, and basket bore testimony to patience, attention, and collaboration with nature. Through deliberate handling, careful observation, and mindful practice, communities secured both sustenance and continuity, embedding knowledge, culture, and values into the very structure of daily life. These are quiet, deliberate acts shaped generations, fostering mindfulness, responsibility, and continuity. The season's harvest, now safely stored, represented not only food, but memory, practice, and the gentle rhythm of life at Tuneto, the land. After months of careful labor, tending, and harvesting, many communities observed the season's end with gentle celebrations, modest feasts designed less for spectacle than for reflection and gratitude. These feasts were quiet, of both effort and sustenance, occasions where families, neighbors, and friends gathered to mark the transition from the work of the fields to the stillness of winter. Tables were often set outdoors, under trees, or near the edge of the village square, arranged with a simplicity that reflected the character of agrarian life. Bread, still warm from morning ovens, was placed alongside bowls of roasted roots, stews of grains and legumes, and fruit preserved in honey or syrups. Herbs from gardens, rosemary, sage, thyme were scattered regently across platters, not only for flavor but to symbolize care, growth, and connection to the earth. Each dish, prepared with patience and attention, spoke to the rhythms of the seasons, and the continuity of labor passed from one generation to the next. The gatherings were social but measured, with movement, conversation, and sound unfolding at a gentle pace. Villagers greeted each other quietly, exchanging small nods or handshakes, and children, though naturally lively, were guided toward a rhythm of play that harmonized with the calm of their meal. Soft laughter punctuated the evening air, mingling with the faint aroma of baked goods and roasting vegetables, creating a multi-sensory environment that was both calming and celebratory. These feasts were not lavish in scale or in the variety of foods, but they were rich in meaning. Every item on the table reflected months of patient attention, planting, tending, harvesting, and preparing. The food itself was a testament to the careful observation of weather, soil, and growth cycles, and sharing it reinforced bonds within the community. Preparation for these feasts was deliberate and methodical. Adults worked throughout the day, arranging tables, cleaning cooking surfaces, and slowly roasting roots over open fires or in simple ovens. Clay pots and wooden bowls were polished and set out in careful order. Children assisted by carrying small bundles of herbs, arranging flowers, or fetching water, participating in the rhythm of preparation. Even the smallest gestures, folding cloths, stacking bread, or balancing bowls, carried significance, reinforcing the idea that attention to detail and shared responsibility was central to the success of communal life. By the time guests gathered, the space itself felt imbued with calm anticipation, a slow unfolding of ceremony rather than frantic activity. Feasts of gratitude often included gentle expressions of thanks, quietly directed to the natural world as well as to humanity. Villagers might raise cups of watered wine, simple ale, or cool spring water, acknowledging their rain that had nourished crops, the sun that ripened grain, and the soil that had supported growth. Bread was broken deliberately, sometimes shared among those seated nearest, as a symbol of collective effort and sustenance. Fruit, honey, and preserved goods were passed slowly, each movement carrying both practicality and a subtle ceremonial weight. Children observed these actions carefully, absorbing lessons in mindfulness, respect, and the subtle ways in which work, gratitude, and celebration intersected. Through observation, participation, and gentle instruction, young people internalized the rhythms of agrarian life, learning that acknowledgement and sharing were inseparable from labor and care. Music and storytelling were often woven into the feast doorways with calm restraint. Softly sung songs, some playful and others more reflective, punctuated the evening. The melodies, often passed down through generations, were simple but resonant, rising and falling with the natural cadence of conversation and movement. Children might be invited to clap along or offer small dances, their movements guided gently by adults to maintain harmony with the overall pace. Elders told stories that combined memory, legend, and practical knowledge, tales of past harvests, of helpful neighbors, or of lessons learned from observation of the natural world. Each story reinforced values of patience, cooperation, attentiveness, and humility, linking the present gathering with the wisdom of those who had come before. Vekam, measured delivery of song and story, contributed to the soothing atmosphere, encouraging both reflection and the gentle passage of time. The placement of seating and the arrangement of tables were likewise deliberate, reflecting social cohesion and accessibility rather than hierarchy. People sat where they could, easily conversed with neighbors, shared dishes, and witnessed the rituals of thanks and offering. Children's spaces were near adults but allowed freedom to observe and participate safely. The act of sitting together, sharing food, and exchange words reinforced communal bonds, creating an atmosphere of calm inclusion. Through repeated participation in Suk feasts, younger generations internalized both social and practical structures, understanding how attentiveness and careful observation shaped collective life. The sensory experience of the feast was rich, yet gentle. The warmth of the sun, fading slowly toward evening, combined with the soft flicker of lanterns or torches, the aroma of baking bread, roasted roots, and herbs created a subtle, grounding fragrance. The textures of food, from the crusty bread to tender roasted vegetables, offered tactile satisfaction that reinforced the mind-body connection to labor and reward. Sounds were soft and layered. Children's gentle laughter, adults' low conversations, and the rhythmic motions of food preparation. These elements combined to foster an immersive environment conducive to reflection, gratitude, and calm attentiveness. Feasts also provided an opportunity for reflection on abundance, limitation, and balance. While the harvest was a time of plenty, participants were mindful of the cycles that would follow. The long winter, the necessity of careful rationing, and the work that would begin again in spring. Through these reflections, the feast became a quiet meditation on sustainability, patience, and foresight. Adults would remark on the quality of grain, the success of particular crops, or the resilience of families through the growing season, while children absorbed these observations, as practical guidance and ethical instruction. In this way, the feast linked immediate sensory pleasure with long-term contemplation. blending nourishment with mindful awareness. Community cooperation was central to these gatherings. Food was often prepared collectively, with neighbors contributing small portions of produce, baked goods, or dairy. The act of sharing labor mirrored the sharing of harvest goods, reinforcing social bonds. Children witnessed how cooperation, combined with careful attention to detail and respect for others' efforts, produced both tangible and intangible rewards. Participation in preparation, serving, and consumption offered a gentle, practical education in the ethics of communal life, the value of patience, care, generosity, and respect for the interdependence of human and natural systems. Even the quietest details held meaning. The placement of herbs, the folding of cloth napkins, the gentle lifting of lids on clay pots all became acts of mindfulness. Children observed the subtle attentiveness of elders, learning that careful observation, deliberate movement, and appreciation of small gestures were integral to both survival and social cohesion. Through repeated exposure to these rhythms, young people developed a nuanced understanding of temporality, effort, and the intertwining of human action with natural processes. Each action, no matter how small, contributed to the overall harmony of the feast. The timing of feasts was carefully aligned with the natural cycle of the day and season. As the sun lowered in the sky, shadows lengthened and the air cooled, providing natural cues for slowing activity, and lanterns or torches were lit gradually, casting gentle pools of light that highlighted the textures of food, the warmth of faces, and the subtle movement of hands and arms. The interplay of natural and artificial light created a comforting visual rhythm, guiding the pace of eating, conversation, and observation. Children absorbed these cues, learning to attune their movements and attention to environmental rhythms, a skill crucial for both work and domestic life. Feasts were also occasions for the reinforcement of tradition and culturality. Recipes, preparation methods, and even seating arrangements often reflected long-standing local practices, connecting participants to their ancestors. Through these repeated rituals, communities preserved knowledge, values, and cultural continuity. Children, while enjoying the immediate pleasures of taste and companionship, were subtly introduced to the wisdom embedded in patterns of care, attention, and celebration. In this way, the feast served as both sustenance and education, nourishing body, mind, and memories. The sensory environment extended beyond sight, sound, and taste to include touch and motion. Handling utensils, passing dishes, and sharing portions offered tactile engagement, reinforcing attentiveness and deliberate action. The rhythmic movements of chopping, stirring, serving, and eating created patterns that echoed steady pace of harvest work, linking the physicality of labor to the calm flow of communal life. Children, observing and participating, internalized these patterns, gaining both practical skill and subtle lessons in rhythm, patience, and communal harmony. As darkness settled, feasts gradually transitioned into quiet reflection. Conversations slowed, children grew drowsy, and participants paused to observe the fading light and the quiet presence of each other. The final acts often involved simple expressions of thanks, a whispered word, a lifted cup, or the careful gathering of leftover food to prevent waste. These closing gestures reinforced the underlying principle of the gathering: attentiveness, gratitude, patience, and care for both human and natural systems. The feast concluded not with fanfare, but with a gentle settling into the night, echoing the steady rhythms of agricultural life. In essence, the Feast of Gratitude was a delicate balance between celebration and contemplation. It provided nourishment for the body while embedding lessons of mindfulness, cooperation, and respect into the fabric of everyday life. Children learned by observing, assisting, and participating. Adults reflected on the year's labor, the successes of the season, and the continuing cycles that shaped their lives. Every gesture, from breaking bread to passing a jar of preserved fruit, reinforced the interconnectedness of work, nature, and community. The feast, though quiet and gentle, was a ritual that honored both human effort and the generosity of the land, leaving an imprint that would carry into the next season of planting and tending. Through these repeated feasts, across generations, communities cultivated a sense of continuity, stability, and attentive care. Children internalized both practical skills, preparing food, observing quality, assisting with tasks, and ethical principles, patience, respect, and gratitude. Adults reinforced these lessons through example, ensuring that cultural memory, practical knowledge, and emotional understanding intertwined seamlessly. In this way, the harvest feast became a bridge between past and future, between labor and reflection, and between the individual and the community. The evening concluded in gentle stillness. Lanterns dimmed, conversations faded, and participants lingered only briefly to gather personal belongings. Children, often sleepy but content, were guided home by their parents, carrying with them both the physical nourishment of the feast and the quiet impressions of ceremony, rhythm, and gratitude. Adults lingered slightly to tidy, store leftovers, and ensure that each dish and utensil was returned to its place. The sense of completion, quiet satisfaction, and shared accomplishment permeated the village, extending beyond the immediate gathering to encompass the broader rhythms of agrarian life, seasonal cycles, and human continuity. In summary, feasts of gratitude after the harvest were more than meals. They were genuine rituals, immersive experiences, and educational moments. They combined sensory richness, social cohesion, cultural continuity, and quiet reflection into a cohesive practice that honored the earth, labor, and community. Through observation, participation, and shared presence, children learned practical skills, ethical lessons, and the subtle rhythms of life. Adults experienced the satisfaction of work completed, the joy of communal harmony, and the reassurance that cycles of labor, rest, and celebration were sustained. These feasts, modest yet profound, encapsulated the philosophy of patience, care, and continuity that defined life in agrarian communities across countless villages and farmlands. The rhythm of agrarian life was intertwined with gentle tales of Unsingradion's harvest spirits who moved silently among the stalks of grain, weaving a quiet magic into every labor. These spirits were rarely described with fear or menace. Instead, they were figures of reverence and gratitude, imagined in forms that reflected the abundance and character of the harvest itself. In some regions, their spirit appeared as a woman made entirely from stalks of wheat or barley, her hair braided with ears of grain, her eyes calm pools reflecting the sky. In other places, animals, foxes, deer, or birds carried the essence of it and the promise of growth. Children were told that these beings moved with the wind, rustling leaf sand, swaying stalks, unseen but present, ensuring that careful attention and respectful work would be rewarded with abundance. These stories transformed ordinary toil into something more than necessity. Work became a participation in a sacred partnership between humans, land, and the spirits that watched over both. The telling of these myths followed a slow, deliberate rhythm. Much like the daily tasks of the farm, elders would gather children near the hearth or sit beneath a tree at the edge of the field, speaking softly and with measured attention. Each word was chosen not only for clarity but for its cadence, allowing the story to unfold gently. In Noni tale, the first sheaf cut at harvest was the resting place of the harvest spirit, carefully bound and decorated with flowers or ribbons so that it would find peace until the next season. Children listened with wide eyes, absorbing both the practical details of work and the underlying lessons of care, patience, and respect. Even the simplest gestures, tying a sheaf, smoothing a bundle, or leaving a token of thanks, were imbued with meaning, reinforced by these stories of gentle guardianship. The myths varied from region to region, shaped by the climate, crops, and cultural imagination of each community. In the river valleys of Europe, spirits were sometimes envisioned as luminous figures who walked among reeds, guiding the flow of water and ensuring that the soil remained fertile. In Mediterranean groves, they might take the form of small animals, rabbits, or birds that darted silently between vines, subtly directing the placement of fruit and grains. In East Asia, spirits could have imagined as delicate, airy beings who whispered through bamboo forests or rice paddies, their presence sensed in the soft rustle of stalks and the gentle sway of leaves. Despite these differences, the common thread: the harvest spirit was a patient, attentive observer of human care, rewarding diligence, humility, and respect with a fruitful season. Children's interactions with these myths often extended into the fields themselves. Before touching the soil or cutting the first stalk, they might pause to bow, whisper a quiet greeting, or leave a small offering of water, milk, or seeds. These acts, simple as they were, reinforced both observation and ritual, teaching that work required mindfulness and gratitude. Through these gestures, myths were made tangible. The invisible spirit was acknowledged and included in daily life. Parents and elders would often explain that Wilethe's spirit could not be seen clearly. Its presence could be felt in the patterns of growth, the health of crops, and the gentle sway of the fields in the wind. These lessons cultivated a sense of interconnectedness, empathy, and reverence that extended beyond the harvest into broader life. The environment of the fields lent itself naturally to tall grasses, swaying gently in the breeze, caught sunlight in sparkling patterns, evoking movement even when the fields were still. Shadows shifted with the passage of clouds, creating shapes that could be imagined as figures walking quietly among the stalks. Birds in the sky, insects buzzing softly near blossoms, and small animals rustling in underbrush all contributed to a sense of life surrounding the work. Villagers, attuned to these subtleties, interpreted natural events as signs of the spirit's presence: a sudden gust of wind, a bird landing near a newly cut sheaf, or the first bloom of a flower at the edge of a field. Each observation reinforced the myth, blending perception with imagination, and linking human attention to the vitality of the environment. Storytelling during harvest also conveyed moral and practical lessons. Tales often emphasized the value of patience, care, and respect for both the earth and the effort of neighbors. A story might describe a child who hurried through the fields and ignored ritual offerings, only to find the harvest thin, contrasted with another who paused, acknowledged the spirit, and worked steadily, yielding abundance. These narratives were subtle, never threatening, and never punitive in a harsh sense. Instead, they encouraged reflection and mindfulness, teaching through consequence and example rather than fear. Children absorbed these lessons naturally, integrating practical agricultural knowledge with ethical understanding. The presence of harvest spirits also encouraged cooperation. In many tales, the spirit rewarded not only individual diligence but also communal care. Villagers who worked together, shared resources, and helped one another through difficult weather or labor-intensive tasks were seen as especially favored. Stories described the spirit blessing those who helped neighbors carry baskets, repair tools, or tend animals alongside crops. By embedding communal ethics into myth, elders ensured that the values of mutual support and attentiveness were passed down alongside practical skills. Third rhythm of work, myth, and cooperation became inseparable, forming a foundation for both agrarian survival and social cohesion. Visual symbols reinforced these myths. In some communities, small effigies of straw, grain or clay were placed at the edges of fields, acting as markers of the spirit's presence. Corn dolls or harvest mothers were carefully crafted, decorated with ribbons, flowers, or painted faces, and kept through the winter to guard fertility until the next planting season. Children often assisted in their creation, learning through tactile engagement how to honor both labor and legend, handling the materials, braiding, tying, and shaping tortics, terity, patience, and symbolic thinking. These symbols became tangible expressions of stories, offering a bridge between imagination and reality. Even everyday observations were subtly influenced by myth. The rustle of wind through barley, the shimmer of morning dew on stalks, or the sudden movement of a bird might all be attributed to the gentle passage of the harvest spirit. Villagers learned to slow their pace, observe closely, and interpret small phenomena with attention. These moments of mindfulness reinforced a sense of wonder and attentiveness, linking ordinary labor with spiritual reflection. Children internalized this attentiveness as part of their upbringing, cultivating observation skills, patience, and appreciation for the natural world. The myths also encouraged reflection on temporality and cycles. Stories often emphasized that growth, ripening, and decay followed predictable patterns, and that humans participated in these cycles rather than controlling them. The spirit, patient and eternal, guided farmers through repetition, teaching that diligence and respect over time yielded results, even if immediate outcomes were uncertain. Through these narratives, villagers cultivated a long-term perspective, learning to plan, observe, and adjust their labor according to natural rhythms. This sense of continuity offered comfort and stability, especially as seasons changed and uncertainty was inevitable. Storytelling was integrated into both daily life and festival moments. During harvest celebrations, elders might recount tales of spirits weaving between fields, of the first sheaf's significance, or of children learning to honor unseen guardians. Songs and chants often accompanied the stories, soft and repetitive, providing auditory reinforcement of themes: patience, gratitude, attentiveness, and the blending of human and natural labor. This illumines created an immersive environment where the boundary between work, play, and reflection was gently and continuous. The myths shaped the sensory experience of the harvest, making each sound, sight, and action resonate with deeper meaning. Even the act of rest was linked to these stories. Villagers might pause at dusk, leaning on tools or sitting on bundles of grain, feeling the wind sweep through the field and imagining the presence of the harvest spirit nearby. The quiet of evening, punctuated only by rustling leaves or distant animals, reinforced reflection and gratitude. Sleep itself became an extension of the ritual. Dreams were thought to be touched by the spirit, offering guidance, reassurance, or gentle warnings. Through these practices, myth permeated daily life, creating a calm, reflective atmosphere that underscored both labor and leisure. The myths encouraged a relationship with the land that was reciprocal rather than exploitative. Offerings of the first sheaf, seeds for future planting, or small gestures of care for animals and soil symbolized ongoing respect. By framing these actions as responses to the presence of the harvest spirit, villagers learned to view their environment not as inert material, but as a partner in life's rhythm. This perspective encouraged sustainable practices: care of soil, rotation of crops, attention to water sources, and protection of beneficial flora and fauna. Their mythic framework reinforced ecological awareness through narrative, observation, and ritual. Generations upspurred these stories slowly and gently. Children grew accustomed to hearing, seeing, and participating in rituals connected to the harvest spirit. Over time, the myths became embedded not only in consciousness but in behavior. Tying sheaves carefully, offering small tokens, observing wildlife, and sharing labor with neighbors. Adults reinforced these habits through modeling, correction, and explanation, ensuring continuity. In this way, myth, labor, and practical skill coexisted harmoniously, cultivating a calm, attentive, and ethical approach to both work and life. At night, after the work was done and the fields lay quiet, villagers often paused to reflect on the presence of these spirits. The soft rustle of wind through the remaining stalks, the distant call of an owl, or the gentle shimmer of moonlight on a river reminded them that life, labor, and myth were intertwined. Children, drowsy from the day's tasks and observation, carried these impressions into sleep. The sense of continuity, presence, and reverence for the unseen guided dreams, encouraging patterns of mindfulness, gratitude, and calm reflection. In sum, the myths of the harvest spirit were more than stories. They shaped observation, labor, and ethical conduct. They taught patience, attention, reverence, and continuity. They provided comfort and guidance, linking children to elders, humans to land, and labor to celebration. In every rustling stalk, every carefully teed sheaf, and every quiet pause, the harvest spirit moved gentle, patient, and eternally present. Through Thestel's life became both ordinary and sacred. Labor became meditation, and the fields themselves became space of reflection, learning, and gratitude. These stories, quiet and enduring, ensured that the rhythm of work, myth, and seasonal cycles continued unbroken, year after year, generation after generation. As the last sheaves were gathered and granaries brimmed with the season's labor, the land seemed to exhale. Fields that had shimmered gold or green all summer lay quiet under the shifting sky, their stalks cut low, their rows neat and empty. The rhythm of human activity slowed to match the earth's own pause. Farmers whose hands had known the weight of sickles and the rhythm of rakes now turned to gentler, quieter tasks. Tools were carefully cleaned, sharpened, and put away, each handle polished by attention and care. The animals, too, felt thief of the season. Oxen and horses rested longer in their stalls. Cows lingered at the edges of barns, and chickens softly, without urgency. Even the wind seemed to change its tone, moving through the landscape in gentler sweeps, whispering through bare trees and over empty fields. Life in villages settled into a slower cadence. Hearths glowed steadily. Fires, tended with care, sending curls of wood smoke spiraling toward low ceilings and wooden rafters. In the kitchens, women and men attended to tasks that required attention rather than haste. Wool was spun into yarn, its fibers twisted slowly around spindles as hands moved with careful repeated motion. Sacks of grain were counted and organized, stores swept clean, and walls patched or whitewashed in preparation for winter. Children, having spent weeks learning in the fields, now helped with quieter chores, carrying small bundles of kindling, sorting seeds, or assisting with the mending of clothing. Even the act of tucking children into warm straw mattresses was approached with gentle attentiveness. The night's chills softened layered blankets and glowing embers. In these months, the rhythms of work and rest were equally respected. Labor had its place in summer, demanding attention, endurance, and physical effort. Winter demanded something different: patience, reflection, and care. The pause was not mere idleness, for there were always tasks that required calm, steady hands. Roofs were repaired slowly, patching thatch or replacing tiles. Barn doors were reinforced and wooden planks checked for splinter or rot. Animal shelters were cleaned thoroughly, ensuring warmth and comfort in the months to come. Gardens, though dormant, were prepared with straw and compost, protecting soil and seeds from frost. This maintenance, quiet and deliberate, became a meditation on the year past and the one to come. Evening rituals became longer, more reflective, as the community leaned on each other for warmth, conversation, and storytelling. Families gathered around hearths, speaking in low, steady voices. Meals were simple but nourishing: soups and stews from preserved vegetables, bread from the last harvest, cheese and milk tucked away carefully for daily portions. Spices and herbs, dried in the summer sun, added soft aromas to these dishes. Conversation often drifted naturally into memory, recounting moments from planting, tending, and reaping, stories of the harvest spirit, first and last sheaves, and the rhythm of daily labor reminded children and adults alike of their connection to the land and to each other. The calm repetition of these tales, whispered and observed, carried a sense of continuity that extended beyond immediate needs, linking one season the next, one generation to another. The landscape outside mirrored this domestic stillness. Fields, no stripped of grain, lay patterned with neat lines of stubble, frost beginning to form in quiet patches at dawn. Rivers, having carried summer rains and reflected the bright midday sun, flowed slower and darker, moving with measured patience toward distant lakes and seas. Trees shed leaves in gradual descent, their branches swaying gently in the winter wind. Even the sky seemed different. Cloud layers hung lower, sometimes thick and muted, softening the light, or breaking just enough to allow the sun to glimmer. Across frost-laden land, villagers learned to observe these subtleties, understanding that rest was mirrored in the land itself. Growth required dormancy, and nourishment required time to settle. The rhythm of rest was woven into daily routines. Mornings began with soft light filtering through narrow windows, illuminating dust motes floating in still air. The first tasks were deliberate: feeding animals, stoking the hearth, checking on stored grain, or carrying water from nearby wells. The quiet clatter of pots and jars, the soft shuffle of straw underfoot, and the occasional low voice of a child animal created a gentle soundtrack to the day. The pace was unhurried, emphasizing observation, care, and attention. Nothing was forced, nothing rushed. Each moment was an opportunity to reinforce the values that had guided the community through months of strenuous labor: patience, attentiveness, and gratitude. Beyond the immediate household, the community's rhythm also slowed in winter. Market gatherings were infrequent and smaller, as travel was more difficult in cold or snow. Neighbors leaned on each other to share resources, exchange small gifts, or provide help with heavy tasks. These interactions were calm, with conversation marked by pauses and gentle laughter, a stark contrast to the bustle of the harvest season. The slower tempo encouraged reflection, empathy, and observation. Villagers might pause mid-walk to admire frost patterns on a field, or listen closely to the distant sound of a river moving beneath ice. Even routine errands were approached with mindfulness, reinforcing the interconnectedness of labor, rest, and awareness. Inside homes, evenings were often spent in quiet creation. Men and women repaired tools with slow, deliberate hands, polishing wood, sharpening blades, or mending leather harnesses. Children learned to spin wool, sew simple garments, or assist with food preservation. The repetitive, careful motion of these activities had a calming effect, both practical and meditative. Conversation continued softly in the background. Stories and lessons passed from elders to the young, reinforcing memory, knowledge, and shared values. The pace encouraged presence, a deep awareness of one's own hands, the materials at hand, and the subtleties of sound, scent, and touch in the immediate environment. Rest extended beyond physical relaxation. It was a period of mental and spiritual restoration. People reflected on the past season, assessing successes and mistakes with calm deliberation. Mistakes in planting or tending were considered lessons rather than failures. Successes were noted quietly, not with boastful pride, but with appreciation for the continuity of life and labor. This reflection was embedded in daily actions, tending a fire, sweeping a floor, arranging stored grain, or preparing clothing for winter. In these routines, mindfulness and reflection became intertwined, teaching that the rhythm of rest was as vital as the rhythm of work. The natural world offered constant reminders of the need for patience. Frosts, winds, and shorter days prompted adjustments to daily life, emphasizing that humans were part of a larger rhythm. Observing the sea cycles, villagers learned to pace themselves, to align their activities with external conditions, and to anticipate the return of spring without haste. Children were particularly attentive to these patterns, noticing how birds behaved, how snow lay in drifts, and how the lengthening daylight hinted at future planting. These lessons, imparted gently and gradually, created a culture of respect for both time and nature. In the quiet of the longest nights, sleep became a ritual of its own. Beds of straw, softened by layered blankets, and the warmth of shared bodies provided comfort. The soft glow of the hearth, now low and steady, cast flickering shadows that see Meadow dance in rhythm with the wind outside. Listeners drifted into dreams carrying the memories of fields, songs, harvest spirits, and the gentle lessons of labor and patience. Even unconscious rest became part of the cyclical rhythm, a necessary counterpoint to work, a period of renewal to prepare for the coming season. Through winter, communal life emphasized sharing, observation, and gentle care. Elders guided the young, teaching the skills necessary for planting and harvest, for tending animals, and for preparing for months ahead. Work when necessary was interspersed with storytelling, music, or quiet games. Laughter was soft, conversations reflective, and movement deliberate. In these months, the foundations of social cohesion were reinforced, as everyone, regardless of age, found ways to contribute, to participate, and to rest. The lessons of the past season were internalized, stored like grain, to guide future labor and ensure continuity. The rhythm of rest also offered an opportunity for quiet celebration. Simple rituals marked changes in the moon or festivals of light, providing structure to time and creating moments of shared awareness. Lanterns might be hung to chase away the dark, small offerings of food left at thresholds, and stories shared of harvest spirits who watched over both work and rest. These practices reinforced gratitude and reflection, reminding the community that rest was not emptiness, but a crucial component of life's balance. As the winter deepened, the contrast with summer labor became clearer. Fields, once bustling with hands and tools, lay still. Animals rested in comfort, humans moved with intention, and the world itself seemed to slow. This pause allowed both people and land to recover, heal, and prepare for the next cycle. The rhythm of rest was essential. Without it, labor could not be sustained, and gratitude could not be fully appreciated. In embracing calm, reflection, and patience, communities preserved the continuity of life, work, and connection with the land. In essence, winter was a gentle teacher. It taught the value of slowing down, of observing, of nurturing not only crops but also relationships, health, and knowledge. It was a season in which every gesture, feeding animals, stoking fires, spinning wool, sharing meals, carried layered significance, connecting human action to larger patterns of life and time. Children, adults, and elders alike internalized these rhythms, finding calm, reassurance, and presence. Even in stillness, learning continued, memory strengthened, and preparation for future seasons unfolded. By the time the first snow melted and hints of green returned to the fields, the community emerged from this period of rest with renewed energy and awareness. skills refined through months of quiet preparation came to the fore. Patience, attention, and reverence for the earth were carried forward. The lessons of winter became the foundation for the next cycle of planting, tending, and harvesting. In this way, the rhythm of rest was not simply a pause. It was an enduring, intentional part of the agricultural year, as vital and sacred as the first sheaf in spring or the last in autumn. Third rhythm of rest reminds us that life is cyclical. Labor and pause, growth and dormancy, effort and reflection are in. Ancient communities understood this intimately, embedding calm and mindfulness into every routines, teaching that the careful observation of life's small rhythms is as important as any great endeavor. Winter's stillness was thus both practical and spiritual, ensuring continuity of work, well-being, and culture. In these quiet months, humans learned to listen to the subtle language of the land, the crackle of frost, the sway of bare branches, the muted movement of rivers beneath ice. Life slowed, and with that slowness came insight, empathy, and connection. Families huddled together for warmth and conversation. Children absorbed stories and skills, and the earth rested beneath the snow and frost, preparing silently for the seasons to come. The rhythm of rest, slow, deliberate, and deeply embedded in daily life, was itself a sacred harvest, not of grain, but of reflection, patience, and continuity. As we come to the end of our journey through ancient harvest rituals, the fields lie quiet once more, emptied of their golden stalks, yet still brimming with the memory of labor and care. The last sheaf has been gathered, teed carefully, and stored with reverence. The tools of countless hands, worn smooth and polished by repetition, are set aside, resting until they are needed again. Lanterns glow faintly in the windows of cottages, spilling pools of phoned light across timbered walls and low tables, while hearths murmur steadily, their warmth softening their chill of approaching night. Outside, the air is cool and carries the subtle sense of straw, turned soil, and the lingering perfume of herbs preserved in clay jars. A gentle mist settles over the landscape, blurring the edges of fences and pathways, wrapping the world in a blanket of calm and quiet reflection. In this stillness, the rhythm of life, so intimately tied to the land, becomes almost audible, like a heartbeat synchronized with the turning of seasons. What we have witnessed across this journey is not simply labor, but a rhythm of life that is gentle, deliberate, and full of care. From the first tender shoots of spring to the careful gathering of autumn's bounty, every step in the harvest cycle was infused with patience and intention. The offering of first fruits, the binding of the first sheaf, the songs sung in the fields, and the careful storage of grain. All these actions were small, almost imperceptible, yet profound in their meaning. They spoke not of conquest or power, but of harmony with the earth, of recognition that humans were participants in a larger, enduring cycle, rather than masters of it. Thessa rituals remind us that even the most ordinary acts, cutting a stalk of wheat, filling a basket, sharing a loaf of bread, can carry the weight of reverence and gratitude when performed with mindful attention. Evenings were marked not by grand celebrations, but by soft, steady routines that deepened connection and reflection. Familiars gathered around hearths, the smell of wood smoke curling through the rooms, carrying the warmth of fire into tired bodies and calm hearts. Meals were modest, yet each bite was savored for the labor it represented, for the earth and water, sun and hands that made it possible. Children played quietly nearby, or listened to stories whispered by elders who spoke of the first sheaf, the last sheaf, or of spirits who wandered through the tall grasses. These moments, though small, were imbued with a sense of continuity, linking generations, teaching patience, care, and respect for both people and the land. Life in these communities was measured not in wealth or conquest, but in the ability to tend, to observe, and to give thanks. The songs that carried through the fields were gentle threads, weaving people together across space and time. Work moved to rhythm, the sway of rikes and sickles, the rustle of falling stalks, the soft clatter of baskets being filled and carried. Voices rose and fell, blending with the murmur of rivers, the whisper of wind through leaves, and the low calls of animals. Resting in barns, these were not songs for performance but for presence, for grounding oneself in the moment and in community. The harvest, in its simplicity, became a teacher of calm, showing that labor need not be frantic or stressful, and that joy could be found even in repetitive, necessary tasks. through song and laughter, through quiet observation and small gestures of care, life itself was honored. The myths and stories that accompanied their harvest softened human existence into something sacred. Tales of spirits dwelling in the fields, of corn mothers watching over grain, or of the invisible guardians of fertility gave life and work a quiet magic. A rustling in Thuind, a carefully bound last sheaf, or a scattered offering of seeds became imbued with significance. Children learned through these stories to see beyond the physical, to recognize the unseen support that nurtured their survival, and to approach the world with humility and gratitude. These narratives were never rushed or loud. They drifted softly, from lips to ears, much like the wind moves through tall grasses, unnoticed yet ever present, shaping perception and behavior with gentle insistence. Rest, too, became ritualized in this gentle circle of harvest. As the earth lay dormant under frost or snow, humans mirrored its pace, slowing daily activity, turning inward, and prioritizing observation and reflection. The long dark nights were softened by firelight and thrown company of loved ones. Tasks became deliberate and calm, mending tools and clothing, spinning yarn, preparing food for the weeks ahead. Even the simplest actions carried significance, reinforcing values of care, patience, and continuity. In this way, rest was not absence but presence, a conscious acknowledgement that every cycle of work required pause, that endurance relied on care, and that gratitude could flourish only in a mint. The rhythm of harvest and rest, work and reflection, created balance. It was not imposed by external authorities, but learned through observation of nature and participation in communal life. Seasons turned with quiet predictability, reminding people that the world followed its own course, independent of human haste or anxiety. By aligning themselves with these rhythms, communities cultivated not only food, but resilience, wisdom, and empathy. The calm routines, the soft songs, the slow movements, and the quiet pauses all work together to maintain this equilibrium, demonstrating that history's most enduring lessons often lie not in monuments or battles, but in the ordinary, steady, and considered acts of daily life. As you imagine these moments, let the calm of the fields and the stillness of hearthside evenings carry through your own mind. Visualize standing in a field where the last sheaf rests bound and waiting, the mist curling around your feet, lanterns glowing softly in distant cottages. Feel the relief of tools laid aside, the soft warmth of family gathered close, the quiet joy of songs sung together without urgency. Imagine the earth itself breathing under your awareness, steady, patient, and enduring, and recognize that your own rhythms of thought, of breath, of presence can echo this ancient calm. The story of harvest, ultimately, is a story of balance, work and rest, taking and giving, sowing and receiving. Every gesture, from offering first fruits to preparing for winter, was part of a circle that nurtured both people and land. Gratitude, expressed quietly through simple acts, reinforced interconnectedness of human life and the natural world. This is the harvest's true legacy, not just the food stored in granaries, not only the satisfaction of labor completed, but the cultivation of patience, attentiveness, and shared humanity. And so, as the night deepens and your own day draws to a close, let the quiet of these ancient fields rest alongside you. Allow the rhythm of the harvest, the careful planting, tending, gathering, and resting to settle into your mind. Let the calm, deliberate movements of those long ago farmers, their songs, stories, and offerings, carry you gently towards sleep. The fields are empty now, yet full of memory. The work is done, yet the lessons endure. The cycle continues, as it has for countless generations, steady as the turning seasons, and soft as the glow of a fading fire. May this gentle circle of harvest, this quiet affirmation of life and labor, bring you peace and calm tonight.